Out in the rivers, out in the seas, masters of the deep, dolphin mysteries. Bottlenose freaks, short beaks in the night, humpback shadows, pygmies out of sight. All the dolphins, you know it's true, rolling deep in the ocean blue. Stripes and spots, they rule the tide. Water dogs of the deep, they don't hide. In the river's grip, seas endless bounty, ruling the waves, dolphin Illuminati. Praised by Romans, gods to the Greeks, underwater rulers, the power peaks. In ocean depths, their counts to 6. Dolphins in the dark, never calling it quits. Striped and spotted in the sea's domain. Aquatic dogs in their own insane lane. Through rivers they ride, seas they roam. In the ocean depths, they make their home.
Well, I talk about insanity, which is what's going on in your mind, and outside, which is where you communicate with those outside. As you know, if you give too much of your insanity, they'll lock you up. Well, I tried giving as much as I could. They locked me up. They published it, paid me.
Dolphin, Illuminati, deep, deep, deep in the deep they creep. It's that dolphin, Illuminati. In the rivers and the seas they be a constant mystery. It's that dolphin, Illuminati. It's that dolphin, Illuminati. Deep, deep, deep in the deep they creep. It's that dolphin, Illuminati. In the rivers and the seas they be a constant mystery. It's that dolphin, Illuminati. It's that dolphin, Illuminati.
I got that big D energy. Ain't nobody wanna step to me. Bitch, wanna step to me. If you wanna bring that drama, I'll whoop that ass like Michael Obama. Yeah, I got that big D energy. Ain't nobody wanna step to me. And if you really wanna bring that drama, I'll whoop that ass like Michael Obama.
No, Michelle is a trans.
I'm sorry, she's a what?
Transgender. We all know.
Oh my gosh.
Oh gosh. It's okay.
I whip that beat out like Michael Obama.
We already had it with
I got that
Obama.
deep
So
energy.
let's just calm down.
Nobody wanna step to me.
No.
And if you really wanna bring that drama, I'll whip that ass like Michael Obama. I'm a girl, 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 I'm a girl.
Can you save us, Britney Spears? Can we be saved? God, why is Satan controlling the universe?
The world we used to think we knew is constantly exposing woo. Our possibilities come true. So what we do is call out to the good guys, good guys. Witches, widows, MAGA, mystics, infiltrating cunning linguists, good guys. The forum of the quorum needs a secretive society to advance our philosophies intentionally, magically, good guys. Conspiracies, sex, culture, making it's okay to change your thinking, good guys. Good guys, good guys, good guys. The world we used to think we knew is constantly exposing woo. Our possibilities come true. So what we do is call out to the good guys, good guys. Witches, widows, MAGA, mystics, infiltrating cunning linguists, good guys. The forum of the quorum needs a secretive society to advance our philosophies intentionally, magically, good guys. Conspiracy, sex, culture, making it's okay to change your thinking, good guys. Good guys, good guys, good guys.
Brap, brap. Big up
up yourself. Big up yourself. Welcome back to another Friday night episode of the Secret Society of Good Guys. If you are here early, make sure you hit the like and subscribe and the thumbs up and the bell and anything that might hit the algorithm to beat Dr. Fauci, because they don't like us very much. Tonight with us, we have, everybody knows, Donut and Philip, regulars on the Secret Society of Good Guys. So you guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Glad to be back.
Abbie, Thomas, how are you?
Excellent. Happy to be here. I miss my friends.
I am more outsane every day.
You're more outsane?
Outsane.
Does that mean you're
Outsane.
more in the 3D every day? Is that what it means, Thomas?
I'm not really sure what it means. It's something that John C. Lilly said in there, that there's insanity and outsanity.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So he prefers to be, or I guess he was outsane and not insane because they never threw him away or locked him up. They published him. So he considers that outsanity.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
I like it. John C. Lilly still bringing the heat after all these years.
That was from his weird interview where he's wearing like his Davy Crockett hat too. Just such a wild person.
Yeah.
I know. Go on, Tom.
John C. Lilly.
I feel like I haven't seen you guys in a long time. Like it seems like it's been a quantum week or something.
I feel like that too.
I know.
I haven't been on YouTube in a month.
Ooh. Wow, Donut.
Do you get like a chip for that?
I sure do. I spent the last month, instead of the dolphin research, I dived deep into the horses. And I learned everything there needs to be known about a stallion, a gazelle. I know it all now. So the dolphins are so 2023.
Dolphins are old, and I think it's perfect that Philip's here because it so is like mafioso with horse head. Like I always think of the horse head in the bed, and like that is the pivotal sign of you're fucked, I guess.
The most memorial burial.
It's late night.
It's the most important scene of the Godfather.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
The Godfather. What? So Philip, you like the Godfather film a lot?
I do, and it was set in Long Beach where I grew up.
So the Godfather is an absolute perfect 101 on filmmaking cinema because of all the techniques that are applied in the cinema with showing the character through music. Before you see the Godfather, you hear the Godfather music, like Jaws does it too. And just the whole movie is so brilliant. Yeah.
Well, that was a movie. I mean, it was a go for broke thing.
Yes.
Francis Ford Coppola's career was going to go downhill if the movie didn't work. Mario Puzo, who wrote the book, wrote it to pay off loan shark debt, and his agent told him to write what he knew, and he was from like the Hell's Kitchen area or whatnot. You had Robert Evans, who, funnily enough, I just did a podcast earlier this month on. If this sunk Paramount, he would have been pretty much, tossed to the side. So a lot of people's careers were depending on it. And Pacino almost didn't get cast because they basically said he's this midget. They didn't. I mean, that's the exact words they used. They're like, we're not using this midget. And so he actually went to another movie, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, which was based on the Gallo brothers and their war with the Colombos, which eventually De Niro, because he didn't get the part he wanted, De Niro went to The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. They got Pacino back by flexing a little mob muscle. Evans turned to Sidney Korshak, who was like the Chicago Outfits top lawyer.
So the Mafia is what brings you more like excitement because it sounds like you know your history of the family.
Donut, he knows everything about the Mafia of every family. It like blows my mind every time. Like you don't think somebody's involved in the Mafia, he'll be like, oh, that their sister was in this, married to this guy.
Well, it's secret society. It's the Mafia is a secret society. And that's what I'm very interested to. All last night, all I did was watch interviews about La Kosher Nostra, which was interesting.
the kosher nostra.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing about the mafia, especially like the kosher nostra, is for whoever we think we know is the boss, there's someone else. So like with Sidney Korshak being, this mob lawyer, there was a book called Super Mob by a guy named Gus Russo, which talks about the power of the Jewish gangster. Everyone thinks that, Meyer Lansky was the pinnacle. Well, there was other people. There was kind of like quoting like swingers and stuff. There was a guy behind the guy. There was always someone else. Even the Chicago outfit for years when they thought it was Capone, and then later guys like Tony Accardo, they said there was a hidden boss. And then in New York, everybody thought Fat Tony Salerno ran the Genovese family until it was like, oh no, it's that crazy guy in Greenwich Village, Vinny the Chin. Yeah, that's him. He was the boss of the family for years. And Fat Tony did 100 years for the commission trial. Well, in the end, 6. He died of a heart attack. But
Mafia people know the
6 to
name.
100.
They, I think everybody should name their friends but I guess Juggalos kind of do the exact same as Mafia, where somebody is like Fat Tony or like
Donut.
2 times. Yeah, Donut.
There was even a guy named Horsehead too. There was a nickname. One of the guys was Horsehead.
Well, I grew up in Las Vegas, so the movie Casino, Scorsese was commissioned to do that film. Which is interesting thing about Scorsese is that he gets hired as assignment to make these films as well. So who's that behind, him to put out a certain narrative or story? But my neighbors, I lived in the Mafia neighborhood because I was a spoiled little rich Jewish kid. So I was in the nice neighborhood, which is the safest guard gated communities, which this is where the Mafia lived. And Mars Attacks, for example, if you watch that film where there's the swimming pool in the house, we called it the vampire house when we were kids because there was no windows in the front, but it was because it was Mafia. So they have that in Mars Attacks. That was right down the street from my house. And my neighbors, I didn't know who they were, but they were attorneys and stuff for the different mob people that are in Casino. So the guy that played Joe, nobody knows this. This is like there's no documentaries about this. This is just in the neighborhood and talking that Scorsese sent Pesci to go to my neighbor's home to watch home videos of the character he was playing. So when Scorsese's making these films, he's really interested on the different characters, like for it to be actually factual in their maneuvers and whatnot. And I've heard some crazy stories about it, but Vegas is, straight Mafia, but things change. There's like a hand change. The Vatican, for example, with Operation Gladio, where there was that Mafia connection. But then I heard things change, but I can't really grasp it. I know there's an Albanian Mafia as well that's very powerful. Yeah, so it's
that was for Layla.
Yeah, that was for Layla.
I know, right? When you said it, I was like this.
That was for Layla. Yeah. So it's absolutely cool story. Did you see the Alto Nights, the new De Niro film?
No, I wanted to see that because I honestly think a few of the guys who are working on it, it's going to be like their last project. Because I think Nicholas Pileggi, who's like in his 90s now, he worked on it. Barry Levinson worked on it. De Niro playing Costello and Genovese. That's a good role.
It was fun. It was so good. It made me like De Niro again.
Oh,
that's how good the film was.
Does he wear high heels?
Better than The Irishman, I hope.
Irishman was great too, though.
I didn't think so.
It was
very fictional. It's good, but fictional. But with who you were talking about with Casino, yeah. If you look at Joe Pesci and Tony Spilotro,
Casino is fire.
Playing, they look more like than if you look at Joe Pesci and Tommy DeSimone with Goodfellas, because there is no resemblance with those two. Like Tommy DeSimone was like 6 foot. Joe Pesci is like what, a little bit over 5 foot. He looks more like Tony Spilotro, who was called the Ant. because that was just the FBI gave him the nickname the Ant for Piss Ant, but he was a guy in the end who flipped at least 25 guys, I think, and Oscar Goodman, who was his lawyer, became the mayor.
Yeah, I've kicked it with him.
Yeah,
he went to my temple. Yeah, I grew up in Vegas.
And then his wife succeeded him as mayor.
Yeah, I went to the mayor office as a little Jew. You could go on a little vacation there to the office, like on a field trip, And that guy, he's in Casino because he was the attorney for the mob.
Yep.
Can I show you? Casino is such a great movie. And this is all I think about. Such a great movie.
Oh,
and then
have it be the guy with his head in the vice and his eye popping out.
No, this scene ruins the entirety of Casino for me. Like, why did they have to do this scene?
It's because it happened.
Yeah, but watch though how they do this scene. And like, I'm gonna try to play just a short enough amount of it that we don't get in all the trouble. But
My car bombing.
Yeah, it was awful. You're right.
Hold on. I think it does it worse than that. I think it goes back to it and shows you from far away. Hold on, I don't want to. It might be here.
He survived it.
Yep.
That CG fire is not as dangerous.
All right. Does it show you? I might not be able to show you.
Valid
But
point.
I almost feel like if I show you, then it'll just. I won't. And never mind. It doesn't do it. When it shows you this scene in the movie, you guys, it's full mannequin in the car. Like so bad that they didn't even have to. They could have just done the overshot like we just saw, and it would have been fine. And it's just like, because I'm a film nerd, I just was like, oh, come on.
And
They could have had a guy in a fire suit.
That's not even the worst. If I'm just gonna, not a Mafia one, but if you ever want to see the worst stunt double change ever, watch Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. There's a scene where a guy is like 5'1", falls down the stairs, and then he's my height, like 6'5". It goes from like a guy. It goes from what's his name, Jones from Police Academy to being Bubba Smith. Like it's noticeable, and it's such a joke. But yeah, now so I think they were trying to recreate, because in the end, Frank Rosenthal, the one that De Niro was playing in Casino, they said that's exactly how it happened. He literally watched the fire rise up because they said there was a specialized plate underneath that car, and he was able to see it, jump out, and then they said, surprisingly, there was 2 Secret Service agents in Vegas, God only knows why at the time, who helped get him out of the car before it blew up, and they said, it was outside of Tony Roma's, which they show in there. They said when it went off, the bomb, you could hear it all around Vegas. Like it just echoed throughout the city. And
oh man, I miss Tony Romo's. They used to have this worm dessert that was like worms and dirt, but it was like chocolate and gummy worms. What's up with the horse head though?
Abbie makes that.
Every elementary teacher does, right?
I'm like, Abbie can send you the recipe of that. And hers is
Oreo
probably
cookies.
better.
What's up with the horse head?
Horse head in Godfather?
Yeah.
I think in the end, so at this point, early in the movie, other than people coming to see Vito Corleone, you have no real visualization of his power. Because even at his daughter's wedding, it's local people, like it's, the bakery owner, it's the undertaker. You don't really get that representation of what this man can do. And then you see when, Tom Hagen goes out and visits this guy, Jack Waltz, who I think is supposed to be, might be Jack Warner, one of the old school studio heads, because supposedly the story about Johnny Fontane is supposed to be Frank Sinatra with The Way We Were. Because Sinatra at that point was considered washed up, and Sinatra had, Willie Moretti out of New Jersey. He'd eventually contact syphilis, and they'd kill him. They'd call it mercy killing. Moretti backed him. Sam Giancana was really good friends with Sinatra. He had a lot of backing. Don't get me wrong, talented as shit, but the mob loved him, and they helped him get that role. Sinatra did not want anybody taking that role, and supposedly might have warned off a couple of people in regards to that, because in the end they got a guy named Al Martino, who's a good singer, but Sinatra hated him for taking it. But yeah, that horse head is supposed to represent Vito Corleone's power, and in the end, that's the guy's prize horse that he was going to, send out to stud. And the next thing you know, oh, Johnny Fontaine's got the part, and they kind of leave it at that. I think in the book it goes a little bit further about him, but in the movie it just kind of leaves it at Johnny is his career's back up, and he doesn't have to worry about getting smacked in the face and losing some teeth, which actually happened when Brando smacked him in the movie. But it's kind of him kind of getting a resurgence. But I think that's the first indication of the height of Vito Corleone's power.
Which mafia do you think's in control now?
Now, I think when people see the Mafia, they're like, oh, Sammy Gravano's on YouTube and Michael Franzese. And they're like, okay, it's a joke. You already had the Mob Wives, the biggest horseshit name show of all time. It's like, how can you have Karen Gravano, who's the daughter of Sammy the Bull, and call the show Mob Wives? I said, that's a misnomer, kind of like Jersey Shore being all Italians, and I think only one of them was fully Italian. I think there's a front that the Mafia is dead and buried, but then next time there's a bust, they come out and say, this is the death knell of the mob. And it's like, well, as long as there's rackets to be capitalized on, as long as someone who needs a buck is willing to pay 5% interest the next week, I said, the Mafia is always going to be around. You saw they went from kind of like just a loose grip before Prohibition. Prohibition helped them get a good foothold in this country. Then you had their partnership with the CIA, the OSS, then the CIA, which further entrenched them in this country. Then you have how entrenched they were with the union, the Teamsters, the Garment Center.
They got into the government.
Yeah.
You see all the big mobsters, you see their kids become politicians, very quickly in there, and then it just rinses. Look at the Kennedys, you would say, in a lot of ways that is like as pretty high as you can get in American, and they're from a kind of gangsta family.
Well, it seems like there's just like two sides of the exact same coin. You got the CIA on like heads, and then tails of the Mafia. They're just the ones that operate above ground and underground, like almost literally. And then they can sort of use each other's resources as needed, because they would rather maintain, these seats of power. Like, for one of the things that I'm trying to remember the source for this, but they were describing this is that the CIA figured out how to traffic people and drugs by plane from the Mafia. And since they're allowed to do it at a much higher level, and with a little bit more cover, that they just kind of become natural, like they synchronize with each other extremely well. So I don't know. As soon as I heard it described that the CIA and the Mafia are just two sides of the same coin, it started to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, and like even if you think of any of like Donut said Operation Gladio earlier, and how they're just gonna remove a leader a little more peaceful looking than a full coup, so it looks like the people kind of decided on this person. And the color revolutions that happen with leaders is essentially what Gladio does with these drug kingpins as well, and these warlords or heads of family, is they almost want to control one of them by blackmail or fear or whatever way else, because it's not always sexual blackmail. Sometimes they could just actually be like, I'm gonna kill your wife, and then they're like, oh, okay, I'll do anything. So I just think it behooves the CIA or whoever the shadow government is to kind of control the head kingpin, and then us all be like, oh my gosh, El Chapo, oh my gosh, but then that person's always in cahoots the whole time.
Well, think of something like, I think one of the biggest mob CIA operations, even though you don't really hear the Mafia in terms of it as much as like cartels, Iran-Contra. Everything they were doing with Iran-Contra, and they had, they were bringing in drugs through various different entry points. You had it with Miami,
Clintons, right?
You had Miami with the Cuban exiles. You had in first Louisiana, then Arkansas at Barry Seal. And then you had it whichever way that eventually wound up with Ricky Ross in California. So like you had all these entry points, and at one point you definitely had the Gambinos running drugs. they were running heroin, but I've even read where one of the Contra pilots later on said that they were running drugs all the way up to Gotti. But I knew, who was it? There was a guy named Salvatore Ruggiero. His brother, Angelo, was a captain in the Gambinos. Sal gets killed in a plane crash off the coast of Georgia. They eventually, the feds were listening into Angelo on his daughter's phone. They tapped it. And then next thing you know, they got Angelo, they got Gene Gotti, they got a few other guys. And that's eventually what leads to Paul Castellano getting killed, was because Castellano wanted the tapes of Angelo Ruggiero. And Gotti was like, you know, it was a kill or be killed sort of situation. He was like, oh, they're talking, you know, they might break up the crew. No, Castellano was probably going to have him hit. And then he moved against him. It'll be 40 years in December is when he had Castellano taken out in front of Spark Steakhouse, him and Bravano watching at a close distance while, like, I think it was 6 or 7 guys took him out. Midtown traffic on a Monday night, I think, something like that.
Yeah. And then the oranges in The Godfather is a symbolic scene. And then Operation Gladio, that's how they were moving a lot of the product, was in oranges. And the oranges are like all over The Godfather. And number 3 is where they became legitimate with institutions. And that's like the CIA or the Vatican or whatever institution making it legit. So we don't see it, but there's always a power behind the power. Like in Casino, what I thought was interesting, my friends from Kansas, but how Vegas was ran out of Kansas, you know, where they're showing like the family there. I don't know too much about it, but there's like, that's another one. You think it's like, you know, Bugsy Siegel or something like that, like in the front, but there's like a lot of in the councils, whatever they're called.
Well, within Casino, so they show the guy Remo Gaggi. He's supposed to represent, they say it's Kansas City. So you had Kansas City, that was the Sabella family. But really it was Chicago outfit. The Chicago controlled anything from, you know, west of the Mississippi. So Chicago kind of controlled what Kansas City did to a certain degree. Gaggi, I think, was supposed to represent guys like Tony Accardo, who I think in the end spent one night in jail his entire life, died at home, you know, sort of thing. He was the top boss. He managed to, at one point, pass over control to Sam Giancana. And then when Giancana proved too high profile, he ran the outfit with a guy named Joey Aiupa. And that's actually whose farm they would bury Tony Spilotro and his brother Michael after the fallout from the Casino shit show. And a guy named Gus Alex, who was Greek, because Chicago ran, I mean, they were a multi-ethnic outfit, you know, in the long run. I mean, you had Japanese, you had all these, you know, Japanese, Jewish, Greek, Polish, Irish. I mean, they were fully embraced in terms of, you know, ethnically. They didn't give a shit, you know, pardon the language, but, you know, they were fine. Equal opportunity in terms of, you know, making money.
Yes, they were politically correct.
Yeah, Philip's been on here before. Plus, you might recognize him from the 90s. He was in Smashing Pumpkins, I think, right?
You do look like Billy Corgan. That's what it is, baby.
You meet Bill Burr's half-brother?
The third brother. Yeah, I'm curious, talking about Mafia and like Godfather. There's so many different connections where it seems like Frank Sinatra and JFK are like in the middle of this huge schism where like the fact that JFK snubbed Frank Sinatra, and Frank Sinatra starts calling out all these kind of hits because he had made this entire room for JFK. Like it was this huge snub. And then on top of that, the fact that JFK was not playing nice with, I guess everyone expected him to be like old Pops, and he was trying to make a point to do the opposite. That's kind of like the mainline idea that I've heard about all this.
Because JFK fucked Sinatra. They had a deal, and Sinatra got JFK in. JFK could have not got it voted in at all without Sinatra. Like, it was all of Sinatra's pool at the time. They were not going to let an Irish Catholic dude in the White House. And so it was everything, not just Frank, not just the mob, but the entire Rat Pack at the time, which is like the biggest celebrities. It's like Dean and Sammy and Peter Lawford, and then you also have Marilyn and all the chicks that are hanging on them at the time and all the parties. So it was almost akin to the way all of Hollywood, like, and imagine all the people, and they all sang black and white songs to like shut down the world. It's almost akin to that. Like all of Hollywood was like, vote for Kennedy, high hopes, because we got high hopes. And they turned it all for Kennedy. And then he was like, ha ha, I'm not gonna do it. And so
we don't get JFK without the mob backing JFK.
But it's the Teamsters too, right? Like that.
I mean, the Teamsters were fully controlled by the mob, well, even before that, because you had, back when they had the McClellan Committee, where the Kennedy brothers, both of them, because you had JFK as the senator at that point, you had Bobby Kennedy as counsel. That's when Kennedy clashed, RFK clashed with Jimmy Hoffa, and he clashed with Sam Giancana. He's the one who, he said to Sam Giancana, I thought only little girls giggled when Giancana kind of did that in a response.
And then he giggled after he said that too.
Yeah. And so yeah, the was fully controlled by the mob by that point. And actually, they had gotten rid of Hoffa's predecessor, a guy named Dave Beck, for I think taking bribes at that point. And I think at that initial confrontation, Bobby Kennedy zeroed in on Jimmy Hoffa. Like then it became like a vendetta to get him. But I think Joe Papa Kennedy was the one who kind of gave John Kennedy the idea to take Bobby as Attorney General, even though later on there was I've read a few things where they said that maybe he should have picked him as CIA director instead of bringing Alan Dulles, who was a holdover, bringing him in, keeping him, and then of course the Bay of Pigs debacle, which the Mafia wasn't involved in that, but they definitely were involved in obviously Mongoose and the plots to kill Castro in and around that.
Well, weren't the Mafia, even if they weren't directly involved, they were helping smuggle weapons out of like New Orleans over to Cuba?
Yeah, Ruby might have been involved. I mean, because that was something they tried to put kind of a lid on during the Warren Commission. So they had the investigators go to examine certain things, because I remember one of the quotes was, we're supposed to be closing doors, not opening new ones, because Ruby had gone down to Cuba multiple times, visited Santo Traficante while Traficante was being held in jail by Castro. Now there's different schools of thoughts whether Traficante was truly a prisoner of Castro or if it was kind of like for show. No one really knows, because Santo Traficante never talked. It was another one of those guys, very cagey, and managed to hold on to his domain for 30, 40 plus years. I mean, he basically had it handed down from his father. But yeah, no, they were definitely running. I don't know about the whole thing with the Irishman. Like they had that with what was it, where Frank Sheeran meets David Ferry, and and they didn't call him that. They were like, they derogatory, because Ferry was a pedo.
David Ferry was sort of like a Barry Seal, just with a weirder haircut.
Pilot connected to Carlos Marcello.
And the origins of Civil Air Patrol, in which this is one of the weirdest things too on the JFK thing, is that when Lee Harvey Oswald was living in New Orleans, I think as like a teenager, he ends up joining Civil Air Patrol. Which is being run by David Ferry at that point. Far before any of this, which kind of goes to proof that he had been groomed as a CIA member of some kind, even from like young age.
And the crazy thing is, at one point when they were trying to debunk Oswald being connected to anybody, I think it was a PBS special back in the 90s, there's a picture of the Civil Air Patrol, and you see Oswald, and right to the side is David Ferry, because let's face it, no one will ever mistake what David Ferry looked like.
Yeah, right.
The alopecia, whatever you want to call it at that point. I mean, the man was hairless. But I even read, Daniel Hopsicker, the late Daniel Hopsicker's book, Barry and the Boys, said that Barry Seal was in that same Civil Air Patrol unit, because Barry Seal was from that area too. So
what about RFK? Like Trump, a contractor, so he's dealing with the mob and you're not pushing him around. He's able to build, and now he's got RFK with him. What kind of mob ties connected them to?
Connected who? Sorry.
RFK and Trump.
RFK and Trump?
Yes.
When it comes, it's weird enough. I remember reading Gravano's book years ago, the Underboss, and he said Trump wasn't mobbed up. Now, again, maybe that was just, a smokescreen. I don't know. I think in the end, Trump had to have dealt with the mob in some form, but Trump seems like a guy who, again, art of the deal. I mean, I think in the end, he will always defer to whatever is going to. He's always going to defer to what keeps, people happy, but at the same time, not get himself too much into the shit, in the long run.
Sure.
But, I mean, it's New York City back in the 70s and 80s. You're dealing with, I mean, at one point, what was it? They called them, I think it was like the Concrete Club, which was like the 5 families. That's how they built part of the commission case, was the fact that they were getting kickbacks off every project with concrete. And then later on, you had what they nailed Vinny the Chin for, the Windows case, the replacement of windows.
Every single thing you had to build with, it was a different family you had to deal with for the ingredients of your building.
Everything. I mean, to be honest, so
you needed your trash picked up. That was a different family.
And yeah, well, and again, so I
oh my gosh!
I know it's my grandkitty. I was like getting everything right now, though. So I had to go grab it.
Stop the show. What's that cat's name? Let's talk about that cat for a second.
We're on that ground. We're on that groundbreaking information.
What's that? Me. What's its name?
Lucky.
Oh, perfect. Look at it. It's so naughty.
I don't know, though. It doesn't have 3 legs. I feel like Lucky is a 3-legged animal.
Uh-oh. Careful. You got to earn that name, kitten.
I know.
Look at how mad it is, though.
I didn't name it, though.
What a great kitty cat.
Yeah, it's so cute. With its little mittens on and its little bib.
Mittens.
And we can't let Trump off the hook so quickly, though, because I guess you just mentioned one of the things that's levied against him and claimed that he was mobbed up was the fact that he joined that concrete club, that he could have built his buildings using a number of different methods, and concrete was actually way more expensive, but because he did that, magically all of his construction was done a lot faster than anyone else that didn't go through the concrete club. So I guess it's like, if you want to get things done, you hire the mob to do it, but does that mean that you're mobbed up if you funneled them millions of dollars?
Abbie, the cat's name's Lucky Luciano. Yeah. From now on.
There we go.
Trump, I know that he's put out like a few like takeouts because when he met with Xi Jinping when he was first elected and they had the delicious chocolate cake and then he took out a few men in Syria, I was like, he did that and it was so smooth. And this is not a Hollywood guy. This is an actual political power guy who is serious to be a president, that he's like willing to take out people, you know what I mean? And stand strong in the front of dictators and whatnot. And just the coolness of him doing something like that, which would shake most of the world to do that, you know? And him being just like, he just whispers to Cheese, like, yo, just took out a couple of your boys in Syria. This chocolate cake's good. What do you think about, you know, it just showed that this isn't the first, that wasn't his first rodeo.
Well, you question, so with Trump, you could be like, well, did he make any mob connections independently? Was it through Fred, his dad, or was it the Roy Cohn connection? I mean, Roy Cohn represented Carmine Galante, who would be executed in that infamous where the cigar was still in his mouth in broad daylight, or was it one of the other guys? Roy Cohn had a lot of connections, so it's worth looking into that. I mean, to be honest, I still got to finish Whitney Webb's books about all that stuff, because there's Cohn and all sorts of names in that book. But you know, I think when you make a good connection, you keep it. Who's to say he maybe didn't get connections from Roger Stone? Because I think Stone has mob connections.
Yeah, Stone and Roy Cohn were very close.
Yep, and Stone.
They weren't
Stone
gay though. They weren't gay. They just like to have sex with each other, but they were not gay.
They just like
Not stressed that enough.
Stone likes to swing, but you know what? Stone is half Italian. He really embraces that omerta because he never talked. You know, I mean, despite them basically making his arrest under, it's CNN just happened to hear about it. You know, they made it, you know, early morning news, and you know, wanted to do it to embarrass him, and you know,
it's 12:42 Eastern Standard Time AM. So if one were to be having sex with Roger Stone from behind, you would just be looking at Richard Nixon's full entire face. Which is so crazy thinking about it now.
Yeah.
Like if you,
who did he get that for? That because that feels like it wasn't for him.
I know, that's what I'm saying in
There's
the
a tramp
moment.
stamp.
You guys are blowing my mind.
Well, also that guy, what's his name that we're talking about, Roger Stone? He's very connected with the Tates, who operated secret societies through their own admission, bring in these, you know, women, or who knows, maybe not women, to these very famous people. And they were very connected to different mafia connections. And then they went with gambling and all that. You don't get into gambling without it. So just more maybe to connect the dots. I don't really study it much, but it's interesting.
Roger Stone's got an all right broad back. It was broader than I thought it was going to be.
Well, honestly. I always said with Stone,
you guys judge it too. Abbie, isn't his back a little broader than you thought it was going to be?
Quite a bit, actually. It looks like he's missing some shoulders, though. Damn.
Yeah, Roger Stone is skipping shoulder day, but he looks like his lats are better than you'd think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how my lats should look like. They don't, but I totally am capable of it.
If Roger Stone, I know, can you imagine tomorrow
trying to get that Roger
Circle
Stone
to tomorrow, me on the rowing machine trying to get those Roger Stone lats.
Roger that.
Yeah.
Well, like it's the secret societies, they do stuff like with Skull and Bones, at least with the movies that come out. You know, you got horses. That's a big thing with the elite. But also that canoeing thing that you're talking about, where they do the rowing. That was a big thing in the Skull and Bones movie, the Skulls or whatever, where he's a rower. And even in Wednesday, which is connected to the Aluma Bratos, and they had a secret society called the Nightshade Society, which was a secret society that is part of her lineage with her mother in the show Wednesday. And that was like a big thing where they go rowing as well. So maybe Roger Stone was rowing in the secret societies.
I wonder what the alchemy is of rowing.
Because it's important to pick out. I heard this from a podcast that when the elite are selecting people to be part of the society, that they're looking for individuals who do individual sports that are dangerous, like horse racing, where that you're just by yourself and the horse, or rowing, which a lot of it you could be by yourself. These dangerous sports that are more independent. That's something that people look out for. So,
with the rowing, just real quick, the Winklevoss brothers.
Right.
Show that in Social Network with that whole thing. And of course the whole thing with Zuckerberg being obsessed with not being in one of the elite clubs, like the Porcellian and all those others, which they're not like Skull and Bones, but I think they're like, Harvard's version or as close.
If I were to say ritual wise, just in the same of like in Catholicism or even in Buddhism or anything really, like repeating something or enchanting something or counting something, those become very powerful tools. And so rowing would be one of the very few sports that you're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like most sports, you have breaks or like in tennis, you might be hitting a ball over and over again, but it's not exactly the same every time or similar. Like you're over here and over there and underhand and over, like you're doing all this stuff. So it just seems like rowing is super like in a flow state, no pun intended type way. It seems like it like swimming or look at anything with a stroke. It makes me wonder, like golf also has strokes.
No.
It makes me wonder if there's something with the stroke, no pun
Well,
intended.
if you can row, you can traffic too. So I wonder if that's just like an extra advantage on top of it.
There's a song called "I'll Be Stroking"
by Clans Cotta. Oh shit, Clans Cotta. Oh yeah, I know stroking.
I'll be stroking.
Stroke Clans Cotta, but don't stroke so fast. And if my shit ain't tight enough, you can stroke it up my woo. I'll be stroking.
I just saw this thing the other day that like every time you've shaken somebody's hand, like you have to think about that hand is held a penis.
Yeah, every single one.
Every single one.
I will never face a handshake the same ever again.
Right? That's what I thought. I was like, now I'm gonna be thinking about that.
Everyone. And it might
So-
even not be gay.
I want to shout out Becky Brittany Pickle
Pickle
Spears,
Spears.
and it's her birthday. And also, what about Tony Suriano in the Mafia? Like Rebecca Suriano. She's kind of.
Did you just dox her?
No, that's somebody different. That's why I said also.
Do you know that? Do you know a Mafia with that last name?
Siriano, off the top of my head. Now remember, and I still have it. I still have the notebook filled with the names that I could remember. Siriano? No, but again, just going off of, there's people who have made it their mission to never pop up. Like never come up under FBI scrutiny, police scrutiny, anything like that. I said that's why, like at one point, they had no idea how big certain families were. They're like, like at one point they're like, okay, the Gambinos, okay, we got about 200 soldiers and over 1,000 associates. And okay, well, what does Jersey have? Because you had the Cavalcanti family, which is what would be used for the Sopranos. You got about 50, because mainly the 5 families in New York had reach into New Jersey. It was like, the Jersey wing was kind of like the stepbrother. I mean, and there was actually an infamous thing that I don't know if any of you guys ever saw the movie Find Me Guilty with Vin Diesel.
No.
Never.
It's actually an underrated movie. And
I'll never watch it.
I was never.
You're not a Vin Diesel fan?
You're never going to make
Vin
me
Diesel
watch
fan.
that, Philip. I won't watch Vin Diesel.
It was actually, well, I said that too, because my wife had a huge Vin Diesel crush. I'm like, that's not his name, right? I said, I had to burst that bubble. I'm like, his name's Mark something. So it's not Vin Diesel. But Find Me Guilty was like a really, he was a doorman.
I just feel like I have to turn it up so loud when he's he talks in the thing, and I'm like, turn it up, turn it up. Then car explosion, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so loud.
He was a doorman, I think, at like Tunnel, or like one of those like infamous clubs in New York City that was owned by a guy with an eye patch, Peter Gation, who was involved in some weird shit. Might have even connects with some of like the weird process, like the Son of Sam, all that, like the extended shit, Ultimate Evil stuff. But Find Me Guilty was about when the FBI went after the Jersey wing of the Lucchese family and charged about 23 of them in one of the largest mob trials, which they lost. And Vin Diesel played a guy named Jackie D'Norcio, and they already had him on certain charges. The guy gets shot by his cousin, who was like a strung out, just piece of shit. And he gets arrested, and they basically give him they offer him, pretty much anything to flip on the rest of the family. And he's like, no, he's like, I love these guys. I grew up with these guys. And so they charged him, and it's from the boss on down. And You guys still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So what happens is he decides to represent himself. And in the movie, it's Vin Diesel. One of the lawyers is Peter Dinklage, plays one of the lawyers in the movie. And you just see as D'Onofrio makes kind of a spectacle, like he's telling jokes, like he tells an obscene joke on one of his first, like in his opening statement to the jury. At one point, a couple of the jurors are like, "Oh, I think he's cute." Like there's just like he wins them over, and then eventually, yeah, they find the rest of them not guilty. He's the only one who served a good portion of his sentence for his previous crimes, and weird enough, so the issues that wing of the Lucchese family was having, you had the eventual bosses of the Lucchese's in New York, a guy named Vic Amuso and his underboss, Anthony Casso, Gaspipe was his nickname, summoned the entire Jersey wing up to New York because they were going to kill him. I mean, the Jersey wing didn't know that, but they were kind of like, well, just based off the fact that there seems to be some trouble in New York and some guys were getting killed left and right, including being set up by a couple of corrupt cops, one of whom was named Lou Eppolito and his partner Stephen Caracappa, and Louis Eppolito would actually be in Goodfellas. They said they passed, and eventually Amuso and Gaspipe wind up going on the run because the feds are going after him. Amuso gets caught first. Casso gets caught next. Gaspipe says he'll turn and becomes the highest ranking informer outside of Sammy Gravano until he starts talking about Sammy Gravano being involved in the drug trade, which Sammy Gravano never copped to when he gave his proffered testimony to the feds. And so the feds basically said, Gaspipe's lying, we're invalidating your deal. But then there was that, thing in Arizona when Sammy, his son, his daughter, his wife, some neo-Nazis and some Israelis got busted for running ecstasy.
That's so crazy. I'm in Arizona, and my neighborhood is an old hotel where the Rat Pack used to stay at. That's crazy. The Israelis and the National Socialists are teaming up with the. Yeah, see, that's wild. How can I look that article up?
I just remember it was like 1999, 2000. I remember he was under the name Jimmy Moran was his alias because at that point, he no longer wanted witness protection and they let him keep a good portion of his money. He only did 5 years for 19 murders. It was huge news. He winds up doing.
It's not that bad.
I think he wound up doing another 10, 15 years in jail. He went David Ferry because of all the shit he was doing, steroids and shit. Lost all his hair, has alopecia and everything. First of all, the fact that his wife stayed with him, the fact that he engineered her brother's murder, I always found that kind of interesting. That takes quite the vow of till death do us part on that one.
Well, these mother-in-laws and brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws, they're all pain in the ass. I've seen all other family members. I could totally see that happening with the blink of the eye. The show The Office is one of my favorite shows in the entire world. And I am putting together a hypothesis that Dunder Mifflin is a money laundering facility, and there's a lot of evidence to point to that. So it would be great to talk to you more about Pennsylvania, maybe, and the connections there.
Well, Pennsylvania had, who was it? You had Russell Buffalino. That's the one who Joe Pesci played in The Irishman. And again, another guy who we will never truly know how powerful he was. I actually read a book about his successor as the head of that family, a guy named, I think his name was Billy D'Elia, because I think he wound up doing time. I don't think he might have turned, I think the book was like called The Life We Live or The Life We Choose, something like that. Because it even had some call outs to Long Island at one point. But the main family in Pennsylvania was the Bruno family, which later became Nicky Scarfo, and then Phil Leonetti, who was actually not Phil Leonetti, Joey Merlino, Skinny Joey Merlino. Phil Leonetti was actually Scarfo's nephew and underboss who turned against Scarfo. And later on actually ran into Sammy Gravano when they were both doing time together. But Philly was considered the powerhouse of Pennsylvania. Buffalino ran, I think they said it was like Pittston, PA, but his influence with Hoffa, like I know there's a lot to be said about the Irishman. There was a lot of exaggeration, and actually in D'Elia's book, he knew Frank Sheeran, and he said, yeah, the finished book, I Heard You Paint Houses, which I've read, I was on its 6th edit because Sheeran kept changing it to sell more copies. He wanted to make sure the book helped his kids, like that it kind of set them for life, because in the end he was probably leaving with nothing. You know, I mean, can't take it with you. But he kept putting himself in the hit. Like first, he wasn't involved in Joey Gallo's hit. He wasn't involved in, I mean, even the Hoffa thing, I think in the end, it's like, we still don't know. I've heard everybody from Sheeran to, who was it? Hoffa's surrogate son. What the hell is his name? Crap. It's going to elude me, but I'll remember it at some point because I could see his dumpy ass.
What about the Amish?
Oh, I don't.
Amish Mafia.
I don't know.
I wanted to tag in. I got a couple other Scranton connections, I think, because the Biden family has at least 2 different mafia connections. One of them was that James Biden, I think his brother, he had a dealing with this guy named Thomas Farisi, who was like consigliere of the Colombo crime family, and that they were defrauding Medicare. And there's like this whole thing. And of course, since Biden had like an in-between, so he never really got charged for any of this. And then the other one was that Hunter Biden, this one blew my mind, that Hunter Biden, one of the partners that he had in his like Seneca dealings was James Bulger, who was the nephew of Whitey Bulger, who himself had all sorts of alleged, CIA kind of connections as well. So, I mean, Hunter Biden working with the Bulger family at Seneca. So, I mean, that's the Biden family having at least 2 dealings with Mafia. So I feel like that's a Scranton connection, right? Technically, Biden is Scranton, no?
Yes.
And notice, I mean, the thing about Bulger is they've closed off all freedom of information requests now about Whitey Bulger.
Weird.
Don't you feel so much of Whitey Bulger too is so similar to Puff Daddy or P. Diddy? Don't you think it's so similar? Like, it's just like he's allowed to run amok. He gets arrested sometimes. We kind of let him off.
Like a Charles Manson a little bit.
Yeah. It's just like this, or maybe even Epstein. It just like
nobody's ever said to free Epstein. Everybody wants to free Diddy, which is weird.
Only Kanye I've seen do that. I haven't seen anybody.
Oh no, it's a big movement. Yeah.
With Bulger, here's the crazy thing. So he alleged that he was part of MK Ultra, I think when he was in Atlanta, because he also served in Alcatraz for bank robbery. And one of the books I read by a guy named Howie Carr, who was from Boston, was like, oh, that MK Ultra stuff was BS and a couple other things. And I'm like, was it? Or is that you just saying that, Bulger lied and, like, because in the end, we don't know what Bulger gave the FBI. There's rumors that he kind of, this guy, John Connolly, who was his quote unquote handler, never really got much from Bulger.
I don't know who Bulger is.
So James Whitey Bulger was born, I think, like 1929. He's like, he's a thug early on. He's, participates in some bank robberies, wants to get shipped out, like I said, Alcatraz eventually. I think he might have got shipped out like a little bit, like right before they closed Alcatraz.
That movie that isn't The Departed, supposedly a Whitey Bulger?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very loosely based on Bulger, yeah. And supposedly Bulger went and saw that when he was out on the run. And that's one of the
Jack Nicholson's playing you. You might as well go see it.
Yeah. I was out on the run and I went and saw Anchorman. That was a great film.
Anchor. I feel like I might have seen that at the movie.
The rainbow thing that they go on. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I haven't seen Anchorman though in at least a decade. But
kind of the switch a topic real quick on horses and rainbows.
Switch it anywhere.
The wet dream sequence in Eyes Wide Shut. The guy who drew the imagery of the wet dream that the girl's having with the maritime officer was her and him on a horse doing it and like running wildly in the field, because it speaks to the subconscious mind, you know. So Anchorman, they're on that ecstasy rainbow. I thought that was cool because we're talking about horse heads. Got to switch it up from that to that. I thought it was a good move.
Yeah, I like it. When you were saying horses and rainbow, go ahead.
And Eyes Wide Shut is Mafia. It's the Mafia.
When you were saying that, it made me think of Rainbow Bright. But then I was like, I think that's a unicorn.
Oh my goodness. Also,
I was thinking Lisa Frank.
Yeah.
Lisa Frank would leave like a dead unicorn's head in your bed. That's how she sends her message.
And just like glitter. You can never get the glitter out of the carpet.
The word iris means rainbow. Like your iris. And everybody's going to get an iris code.
Like iridescent.
Iridescent. You know what AI?
Iridescent.
You know what AI stands for originally before it was artificial intelligence?
What?
It was artificial insemination.
Huh.
I thought that was weird.
Yeah, because they do want to. I feel like they want a robot womb.
Well, just like UA, like to civilians, that's a urinalysis. But if you're in the military, that means you went on an unauthorized absence. Like that's the real word for AWOL.
Wow. Yeah, so I'm looking into the orb right now.
Okay.
And the orb will scan your iris and give you an iris code. Now, this is going to be huge in the next 2 years. There's going to be a crazy event that goes down on the internet. This has already been warned by all the top people that something will happen. But I think it's going to be different than what we're all expecting, like a leave the world behind scenario, that it will be a flood of AI bots, that it's going to be absolutely nuts, that whenever someone goes onto their phone, it'll be so overwhelming that no one will know what's real and what's fake when you go on your phone. Like you're going to be just totally lost. And then the solution is this world coin orb that you scan your iris with, you scan your eyeball, and then you'll get $42 for doing this. And the 42 is the meaning of life in the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And
Back to the
Elon,
dolphins of it all.
Elon just posted about how he's going to have 42 engines fulfilling his prophecy. So like there's like all this occult stuff happening with the AI and the orb, where you scan your eyeball with the orb. And also when we're speaking of Mafia, like back in the day, like with the coming up into the game, you'd have to be like tough and go fight or take out people. But today is a lot different. You can't really get away with stuff like that today with all the cameras that are everywhere. And there's so much new technology that the top gangsters are the most nerdiest Revenge of the Nerd people, like on the computer doing the hacking stuff. So yeah.
So
told us
crypto
that.
rug pulls is the new way.
The what? The rug pulls, yeah.
Crypto rug pulls, yeah.
Yeah.
When you said 42, all I could think of in my mind, just being sports, Jackie Robinson's number.
Yes.
And breaking the barrier. You know, I mean, you almost wonder sometimes.
There's an occult
preordained to it.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, they do it. It's like they do it it's a ritual for sure with the 42 with him, and it has different meanings to it. Yeah, but the orb thing is crazy. It's the new Time magazine article that's being released, and we're coming up onto the summer solstice.
I wish
look
we could
at
get Summer's meaning of the number 42. She assigns meaning to different numbers, and they're not gematria.
Who?
What's 42?
I don't know. I just said I wish we had Summer's meaning of
Oh,
it.
I thought you just knew
'Cause
what
she
it
might
was.
she might have a thing for it now.
And
I
she'll be
know
like,
I know
"Oof,
some of them, but 42 I don't know.
42 does
Well-
not want to come and play today."
There was a
Like she
movie,
has
I think,
things with numbers like that where she'll be like, "I knew it. 38. It's
23 is
always
dead person
30."
time.
Yep, she'll be like, "I didn't want to say it was a 23. Dead.
Dead.
DEAD."
I just knew it.
Yep.
well, think
Like
what,
It was 83. I just knew this was it.
Crazy.
38, crazy 38. Yeah.
what are you talking about normally? 47, right? 47 and
47.
74.
Well,
Is it-
it's funny because in the mafia of it all, I always think like Orsini family. And so the 47 is kind of, it has that look like it is making a swastika. It is making like Ursa Major. And so Orsini is Ursini. And so everything about their like flag and their crest is all I don't know. This is what I think the United States flag comes from, but this is what I think most of the flags come from. And so
You
I
got
think,
the Knights Templar Jerusalem cross at the bottom.
yeah.
Mhm.
You got always the crown at the top because that's who's really running shit.
Oh god, yeah.
But then they also have this one, which I'm like, oh my gosh, because so much of that stinking red poppy, I always just thought it had something to do with the queen. But then you're just like, oh my gosh, everything like the crown, like, do all the families just all go back to this?
That's the Tudor. Well, it's not technically. No, that's not. No. Can you go back to that image? Oh, it's interesting that it's an upside down pentagram though, at the top.
It makes me wonder where so many other things come from that we think are from other things, but really they're just the Black Pope and the Orsini family. Here is the other family crest. Bink.
Yeah, that's a cool image. I wonder what the bears are.
There's like a crestception where they got like a family crest within their family crest.
Well, you have Ursa Major and then like Ursa Minor.
Oh,
So then but they have like
The
serpents going on.
what's the two things in the middle? Are the two bears again?
It looks like it, but it looks like they have collars on their neck. Hold on, let me go back.
Yeah,
to
that
the
means that
screen.
they're being controlled. When the collar's around their neck, it means that they're servants to something at a higher order. But the ones on the right aren't. So I wonder if because it looks like two flags on one, so one stacked up on the other one, that maybe when they married into the family that married into them, they're under the control of that family. You can see this with the coat of arms for the queen with the leash around its neck of the unicorn.
This is very Spain. And then you have all the different nations with the double-headed eagle. We obviously have our stripes and the amount of nations that have this going on. And this almost looks like a different version of the Vatican flag. Like it's just on its side instead. But I don't know. Pretty wild.
Well, when we're talking about something like the mafia too, like the question always goes back: how far does the origin go back? Well, when you think about certain families in Rome, or Naples, whatever we're talking about, not even Sicily so much, because everyone wants to say Sicily, but think of even like a family like the Medici family or the Borgias. I mean, we're going back to the 1500s, and they were pretty much mafia families. I mean, the amount of power they had, they've, even had popes, at different points, and, controlled the financial systems.
Well, yeah, isn't that how Catherine Medici became queen? Because she was like the niece of a pope. Because she was a merchant family. She wasn't even a part of the aristocracy.
Go on.
She was a rich merchant's daughter, and then her parents were murdered, and she grew up in a convent. But she was the daughter, or like the niece of the Pope. So the Pope like put her in a position to marry the king. So that's how she ended up becoming the queen.
Huh.
And
I feel like
mafia
in a
families,
quantum way, I knew Medici was going to come up in like the next, like I felt like I even said it somewhere in my brain. Like I would like this to be brought in
It's because
somehow.
of the 42.
I
But
know.
think of-
That's what it is.
Crazy
42
38.
means we do it again.
think of how
Circle
there's
back.
been in mafia families when they've had marriages that have been kind of like, I'd say almost, kind of arranged. You had kind of like kingdoms did. So you had at one point in the 50s, you had Rosalie Profaci, the Profaci family, which would become the Colombos. She married Salvatore Bill Bonanno, who was the son of Joe Bonanno. And then you had someone like Carlo Gambino's son, Tommy, married Tommy Lucchese's daughter. And, and there was also intermarrying too. But like ones that were definitely like, inbreeding.
Keep
Paul
it in the family.
Paul Castellano was Carlo Gambino's cousin and brother-in-law. So, that kind of says it all. But it was to cement power. But Bill Bonanno and Rosalie Profaci, like later on, there would be a book called The Last Mafia Marriage, which was kind of talking about that sort of cementing of power ties. And later on, the Bonannos and the Profacis were very close, especially when Bonanno tried making a power grab and allegedly had ordered the hit of Carlo Gambino, Tommy Lucchese, and I believe Sam Giancana. And in the end, all they did was banish Joe Bonanno out to Arizona. They could have killed him, but because he was one of the first bosses, they let him go out to Arizona and retire. And then he writes the book, Man of Honor, which gives Rudy Giuliani the blueprint to prosecute the commission case.
Giuliani, that's such a... I wanted to show you this too, because House of Orsini, an Italian noble family, and then include 5 popes.
Wow.
5 popes. The Orsini are part of the black nobility, and like Benedict, like look at all these freaking, their bloodlines, no joke. Anyway.
And precedes Medici's and definitely precedes the Borgias. So yeah, we're talking old school.
I know. I'm wondering what pope. That's the next thing I'm going to look up. What pope was what's her late Catherine's uncle, Catherine Medici.
Don't be surprised if there's like a pope bloodline the way there is, like, how they say the presidents, or like how they say all the presidents are related and stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if that were the way with the popes, or a good portion of them.
Well, yeah, because they're all reptilians, so they all share that same family line.
Peter Thiel, the anagram is the reptile.
Oh, totally. But that thing about all the presidents being related is a misnomer. It's because everybody from the certain part of the world, like if you're from the same continent, if you go back 17 bloodlines with any of us, we're all related. It's like the percent, how close we all get together once you're from the same continent. So most of the presidents for so long were all from the same neck of the woods. And really, I think that was just a big Sinclair broadcasting thing to bury the fact that Obama was actually related to the Bushes. That's what I think. That Obama's grandfather was actually a Bush.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Well, Winston Churchill's the only he makes an agreement with the Germans that he will have his heir sit on the throne next. That's William. Because other than that, it's just been a bunch of Germans that have run the crown forever and ever and ever. I don't even know the last time an Englishman was on the crown, like 1913 or something, maybe before that. It's just
because they're smart.
What, the Gottsburg or Sox?
Yeah, and they just changed their name to Windsor after the name of a castle because they thought it would sound more English because of the growing anti-German sentiment. So
Yeah, people were crazy,
and it's worked. I mean, I would say that most people would be like, "Oh yeah, the Windsor family, of course they're British." Like, no, they're all German.
No, but they don't come back around because the Germans after World War II, they were sketchy as shit. And if you look at all the bombings of like all around too, and what part of the castle gets hit and how safe they essentially are, but all their people, it's like they're pretty much put through a huge false flag, and they're like, oh, look at this is the Germans doing this, and they have it's like so sketch everything they have going on to it. And like the father is not popular at all. One of the other, his brother is supposed to be the king, he steps down, it's all messy as shit. And then all of a sudden Queen Elizabeth, she's like just put after her dad dies, it's just put on her like a young girl. No one likes her. The country hates her. They try every way to like keep matching up Hollywood with her to try to give her this lure. And the only thing she has is to sit with Winston Churchill. And he says, all right, I'll give you a virgin womb. You're going to knock up this virgin womb. And after you die, Queenie, my heir is going to be on that throne. Enter the Spencer family. So the Churchill family is also the Spencer family, and Charles was supposed to marry Diana's sister, but she already had sex apparently, and whatever their rituals are. So Charles gets promised a very young Diana, even though he's hooking up with his current wife the whole entire time. But it's all about that womb had to be implanted because of Winston Churchill's agreement.
You
That's
make him
what
sound
it's
like
all about.
Rumpelstiltskin or something.
But it's all just about the agreement of the womb that had to be followed through. So Charles didn't want to do it at all, but the queen forced his hand because otherwise the crown would have lost, the Germans would have lost all of Europe.
Well, when you're mentioning Churchill kind of being like a kingmaker, right? One of his offspring, one of his relatives, Pamela Harriman, winds up in the United States. She marries Averell Harriman, who's a statesman, and then later on is instrumental in picking Bill Clinton in 1991 to run for president because she's involved with the Democratic, I believe it was like the National Committee or like a key influential Democratic group back in 1991. And what's the name? Clinton was at the 1991 Bilderberg meeting, which was in Baden, Germany. So like there was kind of that English influence, English, possibly German influence in the United States. So I think the crown.
This is the same Harriman family that helped the Bush family come into power too, just to show how like these big families just know how to back
Brown Brothers Harriman.
Right.
With Prescott. Yeah, no, there's so many. I mean, it is. I mean, now it is an octopus, and just to go back with the Pale Horse, Danny Casolaro's book was originally called "Behold the Pale Horse."
Oh,
that was
wow!
his book project. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, somebody in the chat brought up Lucifer outside the Denver airport.
Yes, Lucifer, methylene.
What's going on?
RFK be, moving product aggressively. He's moving this thing called methylene Lucifer, and everybody's getting back up on it. Everybody's pushing this. We're talking top influencers, most mainstream alternative influencers. Everyone's taking the substance and they're turning their organs blue. And I made a video about it. And I didn't even say it was a good thing or a bad thing health-wise. I just said that it's turning your organs to this Maya blue. It looks the exact same. And that it looks like a preparation for a Mayan chalk ritual, just like an apocalypto. In that Mel Gibson that had a Hollywood, or a second in command, he made the Apocalypto movie and Braveheart, and he has the blue on his face, and it's this indigo dye that looks just like the Mayan blue that was mixed with clay that cured diarrhea.
Huh.
Yeah, so it wasn't anything about it being a bad thing or a good thing. It was just a creative art piece. But
maybe he has special powers for meeting like blue brains and stuff.
Well, like the nobility or the blue bloods, and like so many of these top influencers come from like strange bloodlines when you look into them, connected to the nobility. Or our last show that we did, we were talking about Pedro Pascal or whatever, and like how his family comes from like top government lines of socialists. And I don't know, this week I read in the news, speaking of the Pope and all of that, the movie Angels and Demons was about the Illuminatus moving antimatter. And the antimatter was the topic of it. Illuminati, Pope, antimatter. And CERN is moving antimatter like this week. They're like, and it's very underreported, but it's like just weird stuff there with CERN.
Predictive programming.
I don't think it's predictive programming because it's not in the news. No one's talking about it.
Well, no, I'm just saying that book came out, and then you said that the movie matter, and then the premise of the book is that the Pope died too.
You're right.
Yeah. Everything about it.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's a conspiracy in the church, and I think Dan Brown, like his work, is a smokescreen because what was it, the Da Vinci Code? He got sued for stealing other people's work. Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and like there was a whole lawsuit. He named the character that what's his name? Ian McKellen played in the Da Vinci Code. His name is an anagram for one of the authors who sued Dan Brown. I think Dan Brown's just used to be like, write these books. A lot of people, and I've read a few of them, and I like them, but people shit on them all the time, saying they're just horribly written or whatever. I think they're a smokescreen for actual research, and then people can just be like, okay, well, you mean the plot of a Dan Brown movie book that becomes a Tom Hanks and Ron Howard, production, and Tom Hanks once again. And meanwhile, Dan Brown has another book coming out this year with that character.
What?
Yeah, because each one of those Robert Langdon books involves a secret society, whether it be Opus Dei with Da Vinci Code, or the Illuminati with Angels and Demons. There was the Freemasons with it was the third book. I can't remember the title. Yeah, the Lost Symbol. Yeah. And then there was the fourth one, and now there's another one.
I'm having a money idea come to me. There's like a lean on the Opus Dei, except we get hot girls to dress up and hit guys. But
Opus Dei is like self-flagellation. You're supposed to hit yourself, right?
Well, then what about if we have a sexy girl hold your hand and say, "Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself?"
Yeah, let's do that.
Like there's and we could lean it and just start our own religion. We're at this time where people are just like starting religion. You get a religion and you get a religion. So it's like just a little dom, like a little dom flatulation.
Well,
there's a song. I see a group of girls, like a new Spice Girls, singing Dom Flatulation.
Hit me, baby, one more time.
Oh, there you go. That's Britney code.
The first time I ever heard of Opus Dei was in a book about Robert Hansen, the FBI, the guy who was the spying for the Russians for years, because he was part of Opus Dei. I heard later on that Louis Freeh, the FBI director, might have been part of Opus Dei. And then Louis Freeh was eventually released a report on the Sandusky case, which might have also been a smokescreen. But he also worked Mafia cases. He worked the Pizza Connection case, where they were running heroin through pizza parlors. Who'd have thought?
Horsey, too, right? Isn't that the name of heroin? The nickname?
Yeah.
Horsey?
Yeah. Gonna go see Man About a Horse. Horse.
We have to remember, you guys in the chat, in case you don't remember, remind us to tell Donut that when he gets back. He might. Oh, there he is.
I didn't go anywhere.
Well, just in case, that was a good one. That heroin is the nickname of heroin.
Yep.
Horse. H.
Huron.
Where does Mr.
White
Ed
horse
fit
be
into
China
all
white?
this? I feel like Mr. Ed has a place in all this too.
What the heck is a Mr. Ed? People are writing that in the comments. Like, I knew Mr. Ed was real, and I'm like, what is Mr. Ed?
A talking horse.
Cheesy TV show. Yeah. A horse is a horse, of course.
Of course. A horse is a horse. So that's where it comes from?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is where that comes from.
That was Nick at Night back in the day.
Horses are crazy. Caligula made a senator a horse named Incantatus, who Aleister Crowley believed that the wisdom he got was through the bubbles that came out of Incantatus's nose. And this isn't the only time a political person in office became a horse, in a sense. Like, you got a mule that was elected in political power in America.
No, I actually wasn't there something like one of those movies, like maybe The Omen, but not The Omen, because I feel like that's a Rottweiler. But some movie like that, and it goes into a horse's eye, and then the person, and then the horse, like The Witch or something. Like there's a movie I seen of recent where it does that same thing with an animal, where like a being or a demon is
like a
like
transference.
yeah,
Something like that?
is like in the animal, like jumps
Back-
into that to
And
another.
back in the old days in Europe, people would turn into horses if they were cursed and stuff. So like that mythology has been here. Like the oldest painting that we know of, one of like 5, is the Dun horse painting, which is like 10,000, 15,000 BC, of a horse like in these caves. And even the allegory of Plato's cave, that's not as like top allegory. It should be the horse allegory, because you got the mind, body, soul in the 2 horses. And like the 2 horse symbolism, I think Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, which is a male horse, a stallion, their symbol is the divine twins, which is these 2 horses, or the Knights Templar. They're 2 men on a horse, the 2 twins. And if you look at Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, the 2 faces, they look just like the divine twins. There's the Dun horse.
Are we hearing that Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion are actually subverting the public using Platonic philosophy?
Absolutely, they are. Andy Rouse genitalia.
And what do they call horse racing? Sport of Kings.
It's so connected to.
Yeah, didn't Queen Elizabeth? She was crazy about her horses. That was like her biggest, like love. Maybe was maybe her dogs and then her horses. But it was like her prized possession, I thought.
Well, wasn't there a rumor about what was it, Catherine the Great in Russia? I think they said something like she had a relationship with her horse. I think I remember reading that. It's like, I mean, it might have been an urban legend sort of thing, but
we don't kink shame here.
One of the first downloadable videos on LimeWire was relationships with horses.
Well, that sounds more like Consumption Junction. Well, quick thing with there was what was it? Helen Brock, the candy heiress, who killed her, the Chicago Horse Mafia. It had something to do with like horse trading, and that she disappeared, and later on it related to horse trading.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and well, next week we have Belmont, which is interesting enough, the end of the Triple Crown, even though not in Belmont. Have any of you ever read the Bluegrass Conspiracy?
Bluegrass
Bluegrass Mafia? No.
Well, it's related to Cocaine Bear.
Oh.
Remember that came out, Cocaine Bear?
Yeah, with the Goodfellas.
Yeah, it was it was one of Ray Liotta's last movies, Cocaine Bear. With it had to do with a guy named Drew
Bad
Thornton.
tipper.
It was I remember you telling me that.
I think of every time I hear his name.
And funny enough, right before I came
Ray
on,
Liotta, Bad Tipper.
Smoking Aces was on with Ray Liotta.
Rest in peace, Bad Tipper.
But Drew Thornton was a former cop, and I think he might have even been connected with the DEA, but they called him and his group of associates Blue Bloods, and they were running drugs, and they ran like a paramilitary organization called The Company. And they were connected with like some of the horse people, you know, because again, right out of Lexington, Kentucky, so close enough to Churchill Downs. Thornton and his brother, Brad Bryant, were connected to the Shaver brothers, Lebanese gangsters, one of whom eventually would pay Charles Boyd Harrelson for the killing of a federal judge. And Chaney, we know who Charles Harrelson is.
Tom Hanks's bestie. I don't
Woody's dad. Woody and possibly Matthew McConaughey's dad.
Woody and Matthew McConaughey's dad. Yeah, that's just this week.
And
I don't know why that was in my head this week. Oh, because I saw some stupid Matthew McConaughey like commercial or something coming out, and I'm like,
well,
oh, him again.
They're planning
AI commercials.
to. I just read today, just in kind of weirdness, that they're planning on bringing Woody and McConaughey back to do another True Detective.
And people in Texas seem to think they're like grooming
They gotta-
Matthew for politics.
They got to do a Magic Mike meets the Dallas Buyers Club.
I like Magic Mike.
I
It
know.
was a horrible movie, but I really
It's
liked
all
watching him dance.
It'd be a home run. It'd be a home run hitter.
Yeah.
I have this idea for a
Just like an
film.
Iggy Pop concert.
What do you guys think about this idea that I got about everybody's done the Blair Witch Project or a mockumentary, or they all have done that, but making a erotic video, an erotic
Porn?
film that you get in one of those like cheap stores, but it's a parody film. So like the Blair Witch Project. And it's about Aleister Crowley going to the desert to,
So like gay porn?
kind of like it'll be a very vulgar title, and then you think it's like real or a joke, but you're watching it, but it's like the Blair Witch Project where it's cheaply filmed, but then all these like demons are coming out of portals and stuff like that. But it's marketed
I would
as
like that.
an X-rated film.
Yeah, you should make the demons puppets.
Can we get the Mafia to finance by any chance?
Yeah, like it depended
Or
on the
distribute.
budget.
Well, one of my first film teachers, he made a film for the Mafia, and he can't say which film it was. He never told us, but he said that the Mafia hired him because it was just a money laundering thing. So a lot of movies that get made are just for that reason. At least this was maybe like 30, 40 years ago. I don't know about today, but
It was the movie It's Pat.
oh no, that movie was I love that movie. That was predictive programming. That was straight predictive
I've
programming.
never even seen it.
There was
Oddly enough.
shades of greatness, Thomas. Shades of greatness.
I'm
Was
gonna
that
go see
the
the
character
winning.
from Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
The
Yes.
Pat?
It
Julia
didn't take
Sweeney.
all
I never
the
watched the
Wayne's
movie
World.
either, but
Oh, it's fantastic. They go
I
see
feel
the
like
winning.
rest in peace, Julia Sweeney, or is she still alive?
She's still alive.
my favorite thing was like the
She-
girl who was like,
Oops.
superstar. She would sniff her armpits.
Mary
Molly
Catherine Gallagher.
Shannon.
Loved it.
Molly
Well-
Shannon, like all those things were good, and then I think like they were none of them were. Sometimes I felt like the skits themselves went on too long, and then
Yeah.
sometimes they made movies, and it was like, this isn't gonna go
I've
good.
never watched the movies.
Oh, it's so good. Well, at least
Well-
it's pretty terrible. I watched it when I was a kid. I thought it was hilarious.
So in terms of the Mafia and money laundering, you got to think of like almost like think of. I mean, I only know outlines of it, but the whole thing of the movie and the show, the producers, about how
Yeah,
one
yeah.
can make more with the flop than a hit.
Yeah.
The Mafia is involved in movie.
This is all I was
production.
thinking the whole time when they were talking about Mr. Ed.
They've been involved in movie production for years. I mean, Johnny Roselli, who was Chicago, but eventually went out to LA, he was friends with the producers out in Hollywood. He even had his name on a few credits. And this is a guy like silver-haired, like decent looking guy, but he could have been deported because he wasn't a legal immigrant. His actual name was Felipe Sacco, and he changed his name because he lived out in Massachusetts, where a couple of guys, quote unquote, anarchists, were eventually executed for crimes, Sacco and Vanzetti. So it was not fashionable to name Sacco, just like it wasn't fashionable for anybody to be named Adolf, post 1940s.
My grandpa's name's Adolf.
Shit.
Oh, my grandma's name
It's
was
a tough
Osama.
name.
It was a popular name back in the day.
Obama, is that what you said?
Osama.
Oh, Osama.
I don't know. They went Osama, they went Usama, kind of like how it went, what was it, Saddam, and then, Bush would say, no, I call him Sodom now, to kind of go biblical. But with Johnny Roselli, he goes out and eventually they start extorting the unions, which held for a long time. But yeah, the Mafia controlled, just kind of like Vegas, controlled a good portion of the film industry. And, even though they say, Donut, you might know because you were out in Vegas, the mob left Vegas. No, the mob never completely left Las Vegas.
No,
They just-
I've seen some crazy stuff. I'd be at my preschool. Some kid got kidnapped, never seen again. There's always some crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
See, I grew up in Nevada, and we had Joe Stadino came and talked to our school, and he was like one of the Chicago Mafia men, and he came to and like set up the Flamingo in Vegas and everything, and he ended up flipping, and the only way he would flip was for them to actually make him a cop, and so he became a cop, and he took down a lot of the Mafia in Vegas. But when he came to our school, he was telling these stories of like his daughter doing acid. It's just, he's like, she's dumb as a doornail. Like you could like hammer a nail through her foot and she'd just walk in circles. He was so crass, like, but it was pretty interesting.
Well, it's so as you say that, all I can think of is if any of you ever get a chance, look up a guy named Richard Kane. Richard Kane was a guy connected in the Chicago outfit. His real name was Riccardo Scalzitti, but he served in the Cook County's like sheriff's department. But he was close to Sam Giancana, and he'd be executed in like it was like a robbery in like a kind of like a sandwich place or something in 1973. And some have even put him in Dallas in 1963. But Richard Kane was like a guy who kind of like served two masters. He definitely was worked with the Chicago outfit and also law enforcement. And there was later on a guy named Michael Corbett, who was, I believe, a sheriff in Chicago or like an adjacent area, and knew, like I read his book, I think it was called, it's like Double Deal or something like that. But he actually went deep and started talking about the connections of the Pritzker family with the mob, and like one of those books that later on would probably get glossed over, but you realize, oh shit, how deep organized crime goes. And it's not Italian, it's not just Jewish, it's WASP names. I mean, there's just so much more to it. Organized crime is just well put together crime. It doesn't matter what the ethnicity is. It could be WASP. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just really a well-coordinated crime group. Like technically, we could all be, an organized crime group. We're not. We're good people. Yeah. But
yeah, it seemed like it's very difficult because I was trying to plan out how I can do it. How can I take over? And like, there's no way. Like everybody's like, there's already got to be a power structure in place. It seems like if you wanted to build something from start, maybe a cult or something can accomplish a mission. But to actually be like, it seems like it's something that you're born into, or you grow up, and there's already an established family. Everything's already operating. That's what it seems like to me.
Well, you started with guys who a lot of them weren't even high school graduates. And again, that's not to shit on anyone who's not, because there are people who are so much more intelligent with or without school. But you went from guys who hadn't passed 8th grade, high school level, to where you get guys who are graduating out of military academies, went to college. I don't know if they went to Ivy League schools, but you got guys who were like further up the ladder, but never had the street smarts of a Carlo Gambino. Carlo Gambino managed to be boss for 19 years of the Gambinos, and he was a smart guy. And the only thing they talked about was the only like vanity he ever had was his license plate that said CG1. That was it. The guy lived like a friggin', like a pauper. He dies in his home in Massapequa on Long Island, watching a Yankee game in his sleep. Couldn't ask for better for a mob boss. Dying in your sleep is the best way to go. And then he gives, he turns it over to Paul Castellano, who's dead within 9 years because he thought he could run the Mafia, kind of like Michael Corleone thinks he can in Godfather 3. He thinks he can become a businessman. When Paul Castellano got killed, he had no gun on him. It was him and his underboss / driver, Tommy Bellotti. And I mean, the makings of that, coup were there. But the generational sort of passing down doesn't happen as much. So for someone like John Gotti, who, elevated his idiot son, Junior, there was other bosses who kind of frowned on that. They're like, oh, that's too bad. I think it was Vinny the Chin when John Gotti's like, yeah, I just made my son. And he's like, oh, that's too bad. Like that was not his intention. Some people didn't want that for their kids. They wanted better for them. Kind of like the great scene in The Godfather, which is not written by Mario Puzo and not written by Francis Ford Coppola, is the last scene between Vito Corleone and Michael, where he says, I never wanted this for you. Could have been anybody, could have been senator, governor. That was written by a guy named Robert Towne, who passed a few years ago. Robert Towne wrote that scene because Francis Ford Coppola asked him to. And he's like, what can I give you? I'll buy you a car, I'll buy this. He's like, if you win the Academy Award, just thank me. And later on, Robert Towne was a script doctor. He also later wrote Chinatown and would write a bunch of other movies, including, I believe, Days of Thunder. He wrote a couple of, actually, I think he wrote or worked on the Mission Impossible, the initial Mission Impossible script. But he was also connected with Robert Evans, who was mob connected, Nicholson, Polanski, that whole group. So you're going to see some things there. And Robert Towne, other than being a brilliant writer, was a piece of shit as a human being. Anybody who's a wife beater, I count as a piece of shit. But the Big Goodbye that was written about the making of Chinatown talks about Robert Towne's work. But that the whole thing with the mafia being something that passed down that wasn't always true. Tommy Gambino lamented the fact that sort of heavy is the crown. Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
You think that's even today, though?
Nowadays, who's still a general? You look at some of these like ones where it's like, okay, my dad was this guy. Who's still there and who's not a moron? I mean, even someone like Joey Merlino. Joey Merlino, who became the boss of Philly after a mob war that involved brothers against brothers, in a mob war in the 90s, including a shooting that got caught on an FBI surveillance tape. It was with two guys, the two brothers were named the Cingolini brothers. I think it was Michael and Joey in the 90s. And a guy named John Stanfa was the boss of the Philly mob. He actually was Angelo Bruno's driver when Angelo Bruno got shot in the head. Joey Merlino eventually takes over. Joey Merlino becomes kind of like the Nino Brown, the New Jack City type. I'm going to be the guy who gives out turkeys at Thanksgiving. I'm the one who's going to be like the benevolent mob boss. Al Capone back in the 20s and 30s. Merlino wound up being too high profile.
That's the smartest way to go. That's how the neighborhood keeps you safe, I think. Like when you take care of all the people in those kind of ways, then they aren't really helpful with the law enforcement so much.
Well, that's usually how how I understand it. A lot of like Mafia in New York started is that the whole neighborhoods would be neglected by the regular police. So they had to like kind of take it into their own hands, and they become kind of the good and bad guys, but they become the de facto authorities in that way.
Well, so when you think of what Chicago became, because I contend Chicago alone almost became more powerful than the five families in New York. Where did Chicago really become organized? Johnny Torrio and Al Capone, both from Brooklyn. Al Capone had to leave New York because at that point he'd already been slashed in the face, and that was because he insulted a guy's girlfriend. He didn't kill the guy for it, though. Capone leaves with Johnny Torrio, who I believe might have been his cousin. And they start, they take over the rackets in Chicago when Big Jim Colissimo doesn't want to go along with what Prohibition could, lead to in terms of bootlegging. The New York families, so New York was very scattered up until Prohibition. Like what was the New York mob? Well, that was Irish gangs. That was 5 Points. That was what you see in gangs in New York. The Plug Uglies, the Bowery Boys, Irish, English. It really didn't get organized until you had guys like it was Salvatore Maranzano and Joe Masseria, and those guys warred because they were from different areas of Italy. That's how you had the Castello Marese War, which was 1929 to 31, which is when Luciano, Bonanno, Luciano, Castello, Lansky, Siegel, they decided to get rid of what they called the mustache Petes, the old school Italians. So Luciano has lunch with Joe the Boss in Coney Island. Luciano excuses himself after like a 3-4 hour lunch while they're playing cards to go wash his hands. 5 hitmen come in. I believe it's Anastasia. I believe it's Vito Genovese. Might have been Bugsy Siegel as well. They kill Joe the Boss. They find Joe the Boss with an ace in his fingers, like an ace of spades, I believe, in his hand. And then Salvatore Maranzano decides.
Dang, he got a spade, Abbie. He had an ace of spades in his hand.
I had spades all day today.
If you were a person, like, what would your death? What if you died by murder? What card would that be?
By murder, it depends. It would depend on the circumstances of the murder. Like if it was like a rule or law, like somebody felt like they owed you one or something like that, then that would be like probably a king of spades.
What would the ace
This
be?
is wild too. Another
The
spade.
ace is an external event, so something that happens outside of you that you like observe, but it could affect your day. But it has really nothing to do with you.
I came across another spade Chicago connection today, like something completely different. But there was this guy named Thomas Arthur Valley.
Oh, yeah,
you know this guy. So
he was going to be a fall guy with the Chicago plot to kill JFK.
Right, yeah. So when JFK was going to Chicago, they were going to try and take him out, and that was like the Lee Harvey Oswald of Chicago. And the craziest thing is that these are all. It's like one of those weird like Jesus myths when someone's like, "Hey, did you know Osiris and Jesus are the same person?" Because they were listing all the similarities between this like mafia fall guy, I guess, and Lee Harvey Oswald. Both of them were ex-Marines. Both of them were posted in CIA bases in Japan that had the U-2 bomber, like reconnaissance. Both of them were posed as disgruntled anti-Kennedy loners that were armed. Both of them trained Cuban exiles for the CIA. And this guy, he ended up, after the Chicago plot ends up not going off, he is found dead with an ace of spades tucked into like his handkerchief or something around his neck. So it clearly seemed like there was a message being sent there with that card.
Well, in Gonki Fat Choi, the ace of spades is considered the death card. It's different than the Medici, but
in Vietnam, they used to like to leave out cards on the ones they killed. I know there was a thing with, they show that in Apocalypse Now, leaving cards on certain bodies and stuff. But I know, like, and again, there is the Golden Triangle.
Yeah, if they were
Vietnam,
taking out the old hats, if they were taking out the old guard, and they were taking out the aces because there'd be new kings in town.
Well, one of the biggest mafia, so Lucky Luciano, right? So when you go in, if you've ever seen,
I like the calling card. No pun intended.
If you've ever seen, it's not a great movie, but it is one of those movies where you're like, it's a piece of shit. But
Encino Man.
That too. Mobsters with Christian Slater, Patrick Dempsey, Richard Grieco, Costas Mandalore, and actually the later Dumbledore, Michael Gambon, plays Salvatore Maranzano, and Anthony Quinn plays Joe Masseria. And with Luciano, so Luciano is the second to die out of those four, out of Luciano, Lansky, Siegel, and Costello. Luciano, who is actually, he shares my birthday. He's on November 24th. Luciano.
Abbie's cat.
What about the cat?
Love it. I love it.
Luciano.
Lucky.
Oh, yeah. Lucky Luciano.
So Luciano, after the deal is made with the OSS to help, with the Allied invasion of Sicily and also protecting the ports in New York. First, they move him from, I think it was Dannemora, which was considered like Siberia in terms of a jail sentence, down to Great Meadow, which was the next prison. And Lansky helped get him that deal. The Allies win. They decide to deport Luciano. And even though Luciano does get as far back from Italy to Cuba for a key meeting around Christmas 1946, where I believe Frank Sinatra entertained the group, and where they discussed what was going on with the current construction with the problematic Flamingo Hotel and Bugsy Siegel. Luciano eventually gets kicked out of Cuba, and he's back in Italy. And the story goes, in 1962, he plans on cooperating to make a movie, and that various people hear about it, get back to him, say, not going to happen. And that when he goes to meet with the producer at an airport, he drops dead of a heart attack. And then some say there was, nefarious dealings. So years later, about 15 years later, a book is made, and it's called The Last Will and Testament of Lucky Luciano. And part of it, one, I think is supposed to be Luciano's lawyer and whatever. And they talk about the night of the Sicilian Vespers. And that is a story saying that when Salvatore Maranzano was killed in September 1931, and it's guys undercover of IRS agents raiding his office, which turned out to be guys who were Murder Incorporated, so like Jewish gangsters. And they stab him, shoot him, and I think they threw him out of his office onto like 9 or 10 floors. That they said afterwards they got rid of, the story went over 100 mustache Pete's, old school bosses. And then later, like, no, I'm like, that would have, they said it would have made more news. It was fake news back then. And that if they got rid of anybody else, it was like a few people. It wasn't 100, but that became part of mob lore. Which, I mean, unfortunately kind of does come with the territory. A lot of mob books are great, and there's a lot of stuff that is like third, fourth hand sort of information. And I mean,
well, so much stuff, it seems like you got to wait till that person's long dead. It's like so much of the stuff is like, I mean, you're talking about like, oh, this guy, he killed someone, and then we drove here, and it's so many people being involved in it. Like, if you hear a lot of the stories now, it's somebody, they're like, yeah, I killed 12 guys, and they're just talking about it on the radio now on like a random Tuesday. It's like, oh, okay.
Well,
If it's mob, it's different.
Well, they talk about a sign on, what was it, Carlos Marcello's door, mob boss of Louisiana, where it said, 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead. And for the longest time, they said Carlos Marcello was the force behind JFK's assassination. Now, Carlos Marcello was deported by RFK. What happened was Carlos Marcello came to report for, I think it was like an immigration checkup, and basically he was renditioned back in, I think it was like 61, 62. He gets basically thrown into Guatemala, and eventually I believe it was David Ferry who flies him back. That was the story, kind of sneaks him back into the country. And the story goes, now it depends, because I've also read, and Chaney, you'll know this name, Corey Hughes has written his JFK book about Ferry and Marcello, and he said that Ferry wasn't in the courtroom with Marcello, because they said that Marcello, he was having a hearing the same day JFK was killed. There was a lot of weird stuff in and around JFK's death in terms of certain hearings, the fact that LBJ, there was stuff supposed to come out about him and his corruption in and around that time. But David Ferry wound up doing some version of a magical mystery tour in and around that weekend. But Marcello, they talk about 3 mob bosses who could have been involved in JFK's assassination. They say Marcello, Santo Traficante in Florida, and Sam Giancana. Giancana, most of the stuff that put him in it was based off his brother, and I believe it was his nephew who wrote a book. It was Double Cross, and some stuff that kind of emanated from there, saying that Giancana engineered the hit based off of Kennedy backing out of the deal that supposedly Sinatra made, helped put in, and they talk about Judith Campbell and all these other aspects to it. At this point, I've gone from being a believer into the whole mafia betrayal angle to believing there's so much more where it's the CIA's involvement. I believe if any mob guy was involved, it was a guy like Johnny Roselli.
Yeah, you should get Whitney Webb's book, because I bet the amount of connections from all the names mentioned, you'll be able to make the splinter of Shink, because
Yeah.
I know she lists
Oh.
off so many things that you'll just be able to take it and put leaves on the tree.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about synthesizing with different information is if you've studied so much of the different families and the way that these secret societies work, then reading other works, you could just connect dots so much.
Well, that's what he does for. Well, I don't want to out you. Is that what you do for a living,
Who, me?
Philip?
Well,
No, Philip. Don't you like? Aren't you like a book?
What, with the review stuff?
Yeah, book reviewer.
No, I don't mind talking about that. No, I mean, it's, I've been doing book reviews for 10 years and I've gotten to do, I've gotten to do one of the ones that I got to pick was Pale Horse Rider, about a book about Bill Cooper, about the whole thing with him and Behold a Pale Horse. And I've gotten to do some conspiracy books have popped up and they've been great. That book, Interlock, about the artwork of Mark Lombardi, a guy who was from Houston and basically ran into the Bush family and then later on started charting the connections of the Bushes to the banks and to the oil, and then he died, suicide.
Worst case of suicide I ever seen. 2 shots in the back of the head.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they with Lombardi, I think they said it was like he hung himself or something, but he died spring of 2000. And then you think, I mean, I didn't review this book, but you think of a certain other author, a guy named J.H. Hatfield, who wrote Fortunate Son about Bush, that went from his book being a highly touted book to the press, St. Martin's, I think, or I think it was St. Martin's Press, ordered so many copies, and then it turned
Little
out
St. James Press.
I think it was St. Martin, but they found out that Hatfield had been involved in a murder for hire plot. So then that meant, oh, well, we disregard everything he wrote in his book, which included the fact that Bush was, W. Bush was connected to a guy named Jim Bath, who later on would be mentioned in Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. And Bath was also connected with certain Saudis, like bin Laden's. But they basically, pardon the expression, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And Hatfield also mentioned Bush with the cocaine bust, that W had been arrested for cocaine, and then he's like, I had 2 sources to that, and one was Karl Rove, and he held off naming Rove's name until I think after Bush got elected, but I think that was keeping him alive, and I think kind of like. You had 2004, you had the whole thing with Bush, with him going AWOL from the National Guard. I think there was things they kind of leaked. They kind of did a thing to kind of leak it and then found a way to kind of like get on top of it. Just kind of be like, let it come from us so we can control the story. So I think that happened with Fortunate Son. And I think that happened in 2004 with the National Guard thing, because then later on ruined Dan Rather with, what was it, the other 48 Hour show that Dan Rather was working on, because they talked about the typewriter that one of the letters came from couldn't have been from that era. So there was a whole thing with that to say, oh, well, then that must be a bullshit letter. Meanwhile, Bush did go AWOL from the National Guard, Air National Guard, so he could go work for a congressional campaign, because I think Roger Stone had some peripheral involvement, despite the fact that he hates the Bush family.
What about with the Fahrenheit 9/11 connection with this guy and Harvard, right? I think the whole Harvard being defunded, that is a total smoking mirror, because Harvard is known to be connected with Epstein, and Epstein's very connected with Deutsche Bank, and Deutsche Bank is very connected to 9/11.
Harvard, Larry Summers. That was Clinton's former Treasury Secretary. Larry Summers was, he might have bankrupted Harvard at one point. Like, they literally lost a crap ton of money. Larry Summers is shown he's the one who meets with the Winklevosses about Zuckerberg stealing their idea for Facebook.
Oh, okay. And who is this guy?
Lawrence Summers, Larry Summers. He was Treasury Secretary. He's later on thrown in with, he might have helped engineer the reversal of the Glass-Steagall Act from FDR's. the New Deal that kind of kept banks from becoming too big to fail. It was kind of like having bank holding companies. So they had, I think it was called, Phil Graham was one of the co-sponsors, a fossil from Texas at the time, but Clinton signed off on it. Larry Summers was one of the guys who kind of like engineered that. Larry Summers was connected with the banks, so co-opted, you know, kind of like a lot of these Treasury Secretary guys are. Kind of like Hank Paulson under Bush was with Goldman Sachs. And what was it? Tim Geithner was Federal Reserve Chairman in New York. They were all connected with the banks, I said, which is, everyone's like, oh, well, that means they're knowledgeable. No, it could also mean that they're very co-opted and they're looking after interests that you're not going to go check to see because you took their word for it that they sold off all their interests, like Dick Cheney and Halliburton. You know, like I think anyone who's ever been Treasury Secretary is still connected with their financial interests. I think any statement otherwise, I don't know about what's his name, the current Treasury Secretary. If he's not compromised, it wouldn't surprise me. But you know, Summers is a piece of shit. But I know he's connected with Epstein. I know there is the Harvard connection with that, but I believe he left Harvard like almost broke. Not that I'm going to.
Yeah, because there's just a lot of stuff happening that's like on the world stage, but there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And I think it goes into these ancient societies, Knights Templar treasure, stuff like that. Even in Argentina with Malay, how they're studying the rat lines. I don't think it has anything to do with the documentation of the rat lines, but they're looking to find the Templar treasure with the Singapore, Taiwan, not the Taiwan, Spain connections. And this was brought up by Dr. Joseph Farrell.
He's good. He's good.
He's great. Yeah. Did you study any of his works?
I've read a couple of his. I still have Hess and the Penguins. I still got to read.
Real quick before you move on from the Harvard thing, I just think this is really interesting. The Harvard racial breakdown for the class of 2028, 14% identify as African American or Black, 37% identify as Asian American, 16% identify as Hispanic or Latino, 1% identify as Native American, and less than 1% identify as Native or Hawaiian, other Pacific. The percentage of students who did not identify as a race or ethnicity was 8%. So I just think this of Harvard too, this number is not Asian American. It's like all foreign students. So if you really look at like, I just think it's so funny how our whole entire movie dynamic, everything we're told, you pick any monument around America, you pick any electrical thing, you pick any dam, Chinese people with cameras, it's just normal, you guys. That's what you see. And so when you look at all the higher education in our country in class of 2028, if it's all the same thing, so you were just talking about Taiwan too. Taiwan is a smokescreen. Taiwan is China. The currency they have, the language they speak, everything. It's just like this little loophole that they have that they can go through, that it's like, oh, look, you guys, it's not us. But it's them. And so I just think it's super interesting that when you look down there, it's not just Harvard, it's Yale, it's Princeton, it's the breakdown of literally the entirety of the Ivy League. So I always just think that's a curious fact to throw in. It's not as fun as like Illuminati, but it's some sort of secret society like older than our country, I think.
Well, have you looked into any of the Qatari stuff?
Yeah, I've looked into that as well. I just like, for me, if you listen, I know everybody's like, oh, China, who now just out of the blue, somebody says China. No, probably before you ever were a conspiracy theorist, I've been saying China. Like, you can go back to my oldest things that I ever said. Like, you cannot spell CIA without China. And you can't spell China without CIA. I don't believe in North Korea. I don't believe in like the entirety of this tale of like any government that kills their daughters and the rest of the world just lets them do that shit. I just think they were here before we were here, and then everything else is stolen
But
history.
the ancient empire, you know, they've been,
Like
we're little babies here.
inflation,
in
it
America.
just seems like every other thing's so easy to find. I can find so much out about every quote unquote, even it's funny to me, we call them secret societies. Think of how many secret societies we talk about. Think of how many mafia families inside the darkest mafia families. Here's all the secrets. We seem to know a lot of secrets about a lot of things, but
The
not all the
secrets.
things. And so I just think it's curious to me that it's infiltration, not invasion. And so the infiltration is from within. It's from inside all of, look at all of your, I don't know your hospital, but I bet it ain't filled with anyone that looks like you. And so it's just like if you don't know your own medicine, you don't know what herbs do, all the naturopaths are getting murdered, all of that way of life is being taken, and then you're you're trusting, your faith is in something that is no longer something that cares about you or anything that they don't have blood, sweat, and tears in your soil. They don't care about your people. Where are they from? And so I just think that's always a curious thing.
What
That
kind
it's
of
like,
American?
What kind of American are you?
well, no, it's not Americans. I just think it's not Americans at all. I would say it's a bunch of Chinese, a bunch of Indians, and but you're not allowed to say that. But that's infiltration, not invasion,
I
in my
got
opinion.
I got a couple predictions that I want to get put on the record just in case I get it right. I think that the hostage release will happen on June 13th because that will be the 613th day they've been held hostage. And there's 613 commandments that the Jewish people have with the mitzvahs. Because there's a lot of connections to gematria in the scriptures, even with this war that's going on that rabbis have broken down. So that I'm putting that one out there. I said 613, but also it could be it's 610 or 613. And then I think one of those dates from 610 to 613 leaves 201 days, which is like a Jesuit number. Like, so there's like a, here, hold on. Before I want to make sure I say it correctly, because if I get it right, I want to be able to clip it and be like, I told y'all. What day is
For sure.
June 13th?
What's the over under on this?
What? Yeah, we'll run a ticker.
Yeah, okay. So because there's leap years and shit that's going on, so the dates are kind of messed up, all that. So it's June 10th, or I think June 13th. I think June 13th is the day that the hostages will be released. That's just my opinion.
For the hostages from Hamas.
Uh-huh.
Okay. June 13th is the day, you guys. Mark it.
201 days.
Timestamp it.
Yeah.
That's the
So-
prediction date
So
for the script. Donut knows the script. He thinks he's figured it out. And so
Got the
mark it.
downloads. The downloads.
Mark it.
Time stamp for the plot.
with China, so just going back to the whole China thing, and I might have mentioned this to you before, Chaney.
China.
So, remember Chinagate back when Clinton was in office?
No. I was a little kid and I thought Bill Clinton was the coolest. because-
Not her email server that was sending real-time information to China in her bathroom. Something different.
No, this was the Johnny Chung, John Wong. What was it? The temple that Al Gore went to? Who didn't know it was a fundraiser, even though they cut a check. It was hundreds of witnesses pleading the fifth, disappearing, all these sort of things. And then as the case was really getting going, and I believe they had already had an independent prosecutor, then an intern and an affair, all of a sudden becomes the rage. And then Chinagate just goes sideways. And, now it's Monica all the time. And we got to break Ken Starr, who was investigating Whitewater and took a knee on the whole Vince Foster thing. kind of like, Patel and Bongino had with Epstein. And, all of a sudden it's like, it's Monica all the time. Now we got to go with the blue dress and all this shit. China cut both ways. Both sides were taking money from the Chinese. China had access. I believe there was that whole Wen Ho Lee, the guy who was like a Department of Energy employee who might have stolen secrets from, I think, Los Alamos. And then they said later on he got framed. Later on, they kind of just, everything that happened with the case just kind of got memory hold. But I believe that since both sides were taking money from China, whether it be Taiwan or, because again, at one point they were referring to Taiwan as one thing because they were considered like the holdout from like back in the Chiang Kai-shek days, and everything else was communist China, that whatever findings they had couldn't come out. Meanwhile, you think of, Bush being UN ambassador, I think, to China back in, it was before he was CIA director, so back under Nixon, if not Ford, that year or so. I said, George H.W. Bush could hold a job for a year or so and then manage to become the guy. The guy was a CIA director for a year and became the most beloved CIA director, and they named a building after him. I think it's called like the George H.W. Bush Intelligence Center or something like that in the CIA. But he was official over in China, and I think kind of that started part of the whole the détente with China. Might have also meant that we started exchanging money, if not technology. And I don't even know ultimately how much it's led to China getting access. We talk about other countries having access here. I would say Israel is pretty much on par with it. But China definitely got their hooks in us for a long time. That's why I don't think anything's ever going to come out of this blustering.
Well, everyone always is like, all the microchips don't come from China. Some of them come from Taiwan.
Well,
and I'm just like, okay. I think it's that, to me, in my Lego brain, that's crazy tactics to build your country on. If you can flip a switch and turn off all the electronics based on another country's technology.
And there's thing about China and Israel both kicked George Soros out, and then their countries flourished.
Soros. Very, very bad, man.
The devil.
But, they, going back to The Departed, there's that whole thing when at one point DiCaprio was on the phone with Martin Sheen, and Martin Sheen's like, microprocesses. We're going to be at war with China in like 30 years. Because Nicholson's character, his Whitey Bulger character, is making a deal with the Chinese, and it's some sort of technology from the U.S. that's going to China. And meanwhile, it's funny, we talk about China, it's like, I think of OBDM, where they have an entire 5 minutes of Donald Trump saying China, but in different inflection, and it just cracks me up every time, because
I think Trump's doing the best he can to model America after China's economy, because of how successful they've been. I believe there's like more capitalists there, millionaires being created and whatnot. And there's just this huge connection with Trump. The first meeting he did in 2016, he met with Xi, and that's when he did the Syria strike. And he might even devalue the US dollar to make other countries become more have an even playing field. Somebody was talking about that, and I was talking about like 6 months ago. But there's a word for that. A lot of stuff is happening, and a lot of it's accelerating. That's why with the mafia connection, to create a mafia nowadays, there's so much technology out there, street lights and all the cameras
everywhere,
the surveillance state. Like, you can't get away with anything.
Alexa, your phone. Like, you don't have to wiretap you.
Yeah, you don't have to go. Like, I'm gonna go down to the corner. I'm gonna pick up the phone. You better call me at 6:30 p.m. on the dot. There's no more of that to like avoid a tapped phone call. It's just like
you have your burner phones.
satellites.
Yeah.
Your 50-inch smart TV is listening. Like let's face it, anything like, so I'll just give you an example. So years ago, my wife and I were having just like a disagreement, and then the next day something popped up on her thing saying
therapy.
divorce,
like
divorce lawyer needed, and I'm like, and she was like, I'm a little weirded out by that. And I'm like, I'm not surprised. Like it's not a surprise at all. Like they're listening constantly. If this goes back to the Promise software. This goes back to like just so many, and again, generational. Like they're getting more. They're building on the technology. That's why when they're talking about this thing with Trump letting loose Palantir, well, it's just another aspect of total information awareness. They've done it. Like they. How many times did we have to hear about data theft when you get a piece of mail saying your information may have been compromised? I remember my brother got that from a school he had applied to, didn't go to, applied to, and these so many things. There was one of the journalists I used to follow his blog before he got very much afflicted with Trump derangement syndrome. Wayne Madsen used to chronicle all the data thefts that was going on. And he said it might have been part of total information awareness, which they wanted to run after 9/11, and the emblem was an all-seeing eye, like
right. I remember that. Yeah.
And it was run by a guy named John Poindexter. John Poindexter was part of Iran-Contra. He was one of the guys that Bush would pardon on Christmas Eve before Bush left office. He was, I believe, Navy admiral. He was one of Oliver North's conduits. But Poindexter was a brilliant computer guy. And eventually they had to kind of be like, all right, we're not going to do it. But they, like I've said to Chaney before about something like COINTELPRO and MK Ultra, they don't abandon it. They just rebrand it. They put it under another name, and that's it. Like they don't, they'll never give up on it if it could be something that could be useful. So yeah, they'll just call it something else.
Yes.
Do you have any other weird horse things to drop before we
Yes.
Of course.
Horses. Oh my gosh, it's so successful. It's gotten so many views. It's doing great. It's just a home run. Spent a whole month studying horses and put it out there. Took a big risk, because there's different ways to make content where you can do live streams every day, like Tim Pool, who I guess was banned in Canada. I don't know if that's true or not. But who knows? Canada is a fake thing, like with the Taiwan thing. Canada is just the British Empire. So they're just out of that. But the horse stuff, super successful. Got to go watch the video. A weird thing out of the horse thing that I could think of. I think just
showing a teaser. People can go to your.
It's so good. It's so good.
People can go to
horse. Okay, yeah, horses in mingling. The Squid Games has a horse episode. Like, I'm not a horse. That's the saying, and it's called the Mingle Game because horses are so connected to sexual symbolism in a sense. Like even the words we use, oh, he's a stud. Even the word gazelle. Girls have been named gazelle. People say that's not true, but that's been a thing. Or he's hung like a horse or something like that.
Well, what about Trojan?
Cowgirl riding?
A Trojan man, right? A Trojan horse.
Or Trojan condom. Yeah, Trojan.
There's so much connections there because that's one of the symbols is riding wildly free.
Hung like a horse.
Hung like a horse. Why? So that connection is pretty funny. And think about all the romantic novels that Grandma reads with the shirtless buff man on the horse, or Fabio on his horse.
Fabio.
Even Brokeback Mountain, just two men riding on a horse. There's this connection to horses.
Oh, I think that was a Templar reference.
It probably was.
Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah, probably was, but they had two separate horses. The Templars rode it together.
Can I tell you a thing off topic with horses that totally I hate it. I hate the movies about it. It's just wild. And I feel like one of the movies probably is called Wild something in the name.
Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken.
Is that the one where they crawl, make
Jump-
the horse dive?
That's
Yeah.
Dude,
the
I can't.
Atlantic
What
City.
is that? Why are you making horses dive off high jumps into small little pools at carnivals?
'cause
It
people
seems
are
like a
horrible.
ritual.
It's
Seems
funny.
like some
People are
kind of
horrible.
ritual. It's funny.
It's like big luge.
Seems like a nightmare. Yeah, it's such a loosh.
Yeah, nightmare. I see what you did there.
Such a
Ooh.
nightmare.
You guys are so punny.
Well, don't forget, just a quick aside in terms of horses and in terms of the sexual reference. I believe one of Sylvester Stallone's early movies, which was a porn movie, it was called like the Italian Stallion.
Oh wow. Okay, I gotta notate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I gotta go watch that for research purposes.
Would a nightmare be a succubus then?
Depends on how much you really like horses.
If you look at sometimes the succubus pictures, there is dark horses in the backgrounds of
Yeah,
them.
that's right. Like the white like horse that looks like a screaming sort of.
Well, because it's
I wonder if that's where
nightmares.
nightmare came from. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a
maybe because they're
succubus.
writing like the same as Headless Horseman. Every time he goes to sleep, he's having this nightmare, like Ichabod Crane type thing. So
There's
maybe
a
a nightmare.
there's a Twin Peaks white horse. There's a thing with that with imagery. Yeah,
Wow.
thing with the white
Well,
horse.
Trump, his family came up during the hard times selling horse meat in Whitehorse. In this Whitehorse town, which was a mining town, the symbol is this white horse with blue hair. So that was also kind of cool. Schizo connection. Because I was connecting horses and methylene blue and blue horses and Lucifer and made it just a crazy, crazy video. And the music, that's the number one thing. Everyone's like, oh my goodness, the music's so great. It was all Paranoid American produced all the music. And we also dropped a Illuminati animal coloring book. And Beyonce was riding the blue horse during her concert, her Renaissance concert.
And this horse, and some of it is glittery, so it is not just a white horse. They actually are like, here, we're gonna make it pale horse. But look at this flag, Orsini. I can. That's all I see everywhere now. Orsini family. Anytime they cut it off, now I'm like.
And just a callback too to the thing with David Lynch. What did I tell you, Chaney, with the whole thing with them auctioning off Lynch's books? One of the books is Behold the Pale Horse.
Oh yeah, that is so interesting. He knew
that he's got two of the Kathy O'Brien books. So like he was doing. I mean, Twin Peaks had a lot of conspiracy stuff, whether it be UFOs or
just the name Twin Peaks. I believe is connected to Crowley's magical AA Society of the Twin Peaks. Which goes back to ancient Egypt and the Akhet, the two mountains and the sun rising above it, which is the symbol for world communism that's on pretty much every emblem, especially the Soviet emblem. The sun rising over the mountain, just like the Obama symbol, it's for world communism, and it's the sun between the Twin Peaks. And if you go to the Denver airport where it's Lucifer, the symbol that the Denver airport is made out of is the Twin Peaks. It's the Akhet. And that's, I think, super important, but I think it's important.
And before they did Twin Peaks, one of the projects that Lynch and his co-creator Mark Frost were pushing was a project about Marilyn Monroe.
About her?
Yeah, they were going to do. I think it was based off Anthony Summers' Goddess, because he had Lynch has some. Like I said, they're auctioning off all of Lynch's stuff, and some of it includes. There's a book about the Black Dahlia murder, but there's also one or two about Marilyn Monroe too.
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe, because apparently, like even at her death scene, like Peter Lawford showed up at her house and grabbed her journal and whatever else he may have grabbed before they even called the fuzz. Like they let Peter in.
That's like James Angleton, the CIA counterintelligence director, going after Mary Meyer, her diary, and Mary Meyer was the alleged mistress of JFK, and she's killed about a year after. And Angleton, who also the people who saw Angleton at her place were Ben Bradley, and Ben Bradley was married to Mary Myers' sister. And Ben Bradley was later on, Watergate. He was Woodward and Bernstein's boss.
So this symbol right here, you see that?
Sorry, I'll pull it back up, Donut.
Yeah, that airport symbol. Nobody's pointed this out. I'm the only one who pointed it out. Jordan Maxwell talked about this all the time, and I just think it's so important. But no one cares about this because I don't think people care about symbolism really at all. But that Denver airport,
I'm
you
gonna
see
pull it bigger.
how it's going down in the middle.
Yeah.
If you look up the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph of a ket, that's the same symbol of a ket. That's the Twin Peaks. And if you look at Billy Bob's book on the lockdowns, it's that same symbol too. It's the and I wonder, and I'm pretty sure this happens, and I've never seen it, I've never been here, but I bet you that on the summer solstice or on one of these astrological alignments, the sun probably rises right in the middle of that. I don't know. It probably would be for the summer solstice because that would be something maybe.
Or even the building behind it lights all up and turns into like Orby, like you're saying, too, as well. Like when the sun's not there.
That's something. So right there, you see, that's the symbol of a ket. So that's the Twin Peaks. That's the sun rising over the mountain, and that's what I believe the Denver airport is symbolizing, and I believe we'll see a sunrise over that at some astrological alignment, but I don't live there, so I can never see if it does.
I think
Someone needs to do the work and go
getting
check
So
it out.
somebody in around the airport, can
I'm getting
you
an
pay
emergency
attention to
alert.
that, please?
I'm getting an emergency alert on my phone. I've never
Oh,
done
I
one.
wonder what kind. Is it a
It's
purple
silver.
alert?
The silver alert has been issued. The police is looking for an old lady, a 72-year-old, white female. And it's extreme. It's an extreme emergency. That's sad. I'll go patrol the neighborhood after this. I'm serious. I will.
Do you guys have anything you have going on this week that you want to plug or anything you want to chat about before we head out?
I mean, Donna already mentioned the Illuminati Animals coloring book, which is something we've been working on for the last 6 months, and it finally got published this afternoon. So right now it's only available on Amazon. I'm going to get it up on the Paranoid American site. We'll get it on Donut's site, but it's guaranteed to be the best Illuminati Animals coloring book that you'll ever find.
Hold on, I'm going to find it on Amazon so I can pull it up.
If you just search for Illuminati Animals,
That's
it's like
exactly
the only
what
thing
I'm
that comes up
doing.
for you.
Oh, it's so cute.
It's very cute. Yes.
It's so adorable. Here, let me pull it up on the screen so everybody can share in this dessert I brought to class, enough for everyone. So you guys can just go to Amazon yourself and you can research Illuminati animals and you can get this adorable thing.
My kitty cat's at the door.
Look at that. That is really cute. It's so cute. And I want to blow up this. This is like a sample of all of the little drawings in it.
Yep, that's all of them.
Oh, look at how cute the little vril are.
And it's alphabetical, so there's a Illuminati animal for every single letter.
Oh, that's awesome.
I just flashed my Paranoid American sticker that I got.
If you get it from the paranoidamerican.com site, then yeah, I always throw in a whole bunch of stickers. You get them from Amazon, you don't get anything cool, but then you get like their free shipping.
I've actually just busted out my Occultist Mondays. They're on my coffee table. I've been flipping through them.
They're almost gone. I just unpacked the rest of them today. So yeah, I think there's like eight sets left. Yeah, I
got it when I got them.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys could all go to paranoidamerican.com and you can check out all the stuff. There's fun stuff there. So even if it's like somebody's birthday, even what's coming up, Mother's Day just passed. Is
Father's
Father's
Day
Day?
coming up.
Yeah, Father's Day is coming up. Maybe your dad's based and you need to get him some Paranoid American merch or some donut stuff. But you could just
What's your
go
children's book on the
chemtrails.
Yeah,
chemtrails? Yes,
it's
I
called
want the
Connect
book.
the Dots: The Confounding Conspiracy of Chemtrails.
You need that.
So that is what. Look at
I'm so happy that we got to talk about
mafioso Brittany Pickle Spears. She wants one of those. All right. Well, that's awesome. If you guys have anything else, Philip, do you have anything going on that you want to talk about?
So I had just done, what was it? Operation G.
Oh, never mind. Glenn said it for you. Juneteenth. Philip wants to bring up Juneteenth. I'm just kidding. Go on. Go on.
No, so I was on Operation GCD, Occult Rejects, their Friday show, talking about Bob Evans earlier this month, and I'll be on next month to be talking with them. But yeah, other than that, just reading a lot. So that's the plan. I'm reading a book about the occult Elvis right now, which is one of the books I got for review, but heard on one of the podcasts. So about Elvis and the occult.
Oh, I'm in.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's really good. So
because I have a whole theory that the Beatles couldn't have invaded unless they took our king to Germany.
the Sun King. He's the Sun King.
Well, there's something about Memphis, like that whole area through Tennessee. You have the pyramid there. You know, like I just think there's a lot going on.
Well, and they didn't allow him to leave the country too at a certain point.
Once he got back, he could never leave again.
And he incited horniness just like Rihanna did. He incited horniness with those gyrating hips, just like Rihanna did.
Well, that was what they used as the excuse to get him to like, look at, you're in all this trouble now. If you want to save your career, you have to go into the military.
Oh.
Yeah, they just used that as a fear tactic on him more so than it actually was a thing.
And what was it? What were his closest group of friends called? The Memphis Mafia. And then the story went that he was so upset with they cooperated on a tell-all book about him that further led to him kind of like exceeding his drug use and then him dying the way he died. And, you know, I mean, that's speculative. You know, there are ones who talk about the picture of him with Nixon and whether he was a secret DEA agent. And, you know, I'm open for anything when it comes to Elvis. It's, you know, it's an interesting rabbit hole. And Lisa Marie gets involved with Scientology. And, you know, there's that whole
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson. And, you know, Priscilla's a little weird and interesting in and of itself. And, you know, there's like the Colonel, his manager, Colonel Tom, who I don't even think actually was from the United States. It might have killed somebody. I think that was part of it too. And there's a lot of weird stuff. And then who plays the Colonel?
Tom motherfucking Hanks.
Yep. the torch bearer of the mainstream narrative.
That's it. The show's over now on the Tom Hanks of it all. No, I love you guys so much. And Philip, thank you coming to hang out. Donut, always. Both of you are always welcome here. And the best chat in the world. Thank you guys. I hope you guys all have a fantastic weekend or whenever it is you see this. If it's 2032, I hope you're having a good random Monday in 2032. But until next time, turn your volume down because Juliet, take it home.
Can you save us, Britney Spears? Can we be saved? God, why is Satan controlling the universe?
Here comes Santa. Here comes the world we used to think we knew is constantly exposing woo. Our possibilities come true. So what we do is call out to the good guys, good guys. Witches, widows, MAGA, mystics, infiltrating cunning linguists, good guys. The forum of the quorum needs a secretive society to advance our philosophies intentionally, magically, good guys. Conspiracies, sex, culture, making it's okay to change your thinking, good guys. Good guys, good guys, good guys. The world we used to think we knew is constantly exposing woo. Our possibilities come true. So what we do is call out to the good guys, good guys. Witches, widows, MAGA, mystics, entertaining cunning with good guys. The forum of the core meet the secretive society to advance our philosophies intentionally, magically good guys. Conspiracies, sex, clones, Jamaicans, it's okay to change your thinking. Good guys, good guys, good guys, good guys.
You're still here? It's over.